the July 7th, 2025 meeting of the City of Pacifica Planning Commission. This meeting is called to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Sorry, we're getting organized over here.
Okay. Maybe we should put a pin in it until the echoing.
We're ready. There's an echo, but we're getting that fixed as well.
Okay. That's going to be okay for the next 10 minutes, but when we get into other stuff, I think we need to figure it out.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Chair Hauser,
Present.
Vice Chair Ferguson.
Here.
Oh, sorry, Berman.
Sorry.
Vice Chair Berman. Commissioner Devine.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Present.
Commissioner Godwin.
Present.
Commissioner Davis.
Present.
Commissioner Redfield.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson, can you please lead us in a salute to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Ferguson. Before we get into administrative business, any member of the public wishing to make public comment on any item should complete a speaker card and bring it to the front and hand it to staff. On the card, please indicate the agenda item on which you wish to comment or oral communications for items not on the agenda. Members of the public may also participate in the meeting via Zoom or phone. Once I announce public comment opportunity, please press *5 to raise your hand if dialing by phone or the raised hand function in Zoom. Public meetings are a limited public forum, meaning that there are rules for commenting at these meetings. Comments on non-agendized items must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city, and comments on agendized items must relate to that specific item. If comments do not fall into one of these categories, the city will provide you with a second warning to stay within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city or on topic. If the warning is not followed, the chair will direct the city clerk to cut off the microphone, and throughout this warning system, I will seek the assistance of the assistant city attorney in identifying comments not related to the agenda item or not within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. Okay. So that brings us to administrative business. Do we have any comments on the administrative business tonight? Don't have any speaker cards. I don't see any Zoom. Okay, so I'll close public comment for administrative business. And I'm going to move on to the order of agenda. Due to the fact that we have the continued public hearing tonight, I am going to move oral communications to the end of the agenda following item 2, but prior to commission communications and staff communications. So would anyone like to make a motion on the order of agenda with that amendment?
I move that we reorganize the order of agenda as proposed.
I'll second myself. Let's all please vote.
Motioned by Vice Chair Berman, seconded by Chair Hauser. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That'll move us on to the approval of minutes of June 16th. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I have a couple of minor changes. On packet page 19, the first paragraph, where it says, I was talking about deciding about 5 hours, that should be quiet hours in the second sentence and in the third sentence.
Commissioner Davis, that was the second sentence and
Third sentence.
third sentence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep,
Sorry, this is on packet page 19?
19, yes.
Okay.
Staff has noted that edit.
Okay. What else, Commissioner Davis?
I'm going to skip that one. That's for later. Give me 2 seconds. Again, and I'm not proofreading. It goes to the meaning of the sentence. This is on packet page 24, paragraph 3, third sentence, talking about quiet time and setting, S-E-T-T-I-N-G, hours for quiet time are to set an expectation for behavior. That was it.
Yeah, I had one as well, but I'm not finding it now, and it was more just like a sentence that didn't quite mean anything. So I think it's fine, but I think maybe if the minutes could just get a quick proofread before they're shared with us, that'd be great. Does anyone have any other comments on minutes or motion?
Make a motion, we accept the minutes.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion by Commissioner Redfield, seconded by Commissioner Ferguson. That vote passes unanimously.
And I should have clarified this before I took the vote. Your motion was that you were accepting the minutes with
Accept the
Commissioner
minutes
Davis's
as corrected.
changes? Do we need to, are we okay? Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
As amended.
Okay. We have Commissioners Devine and Ferguson designated as liaisons for July 14th, with you, Commissioner Ferguson, as a backup. So I assume no changes needed. Okay. Do we need any other liaisons designated at this time, Director Opdegrave?
Not at this time, but I will share that we anticipate taking the rezoning on August 11th. So just something to think about.
Thank you. And then I think we have a new staff member that I would love for you to introduce, if you please.
We do. Thank you so much, Chair Hauser. We have a new senior planner who started with the department just a couple weeks ago, and she's here at her first Planning Commission hearing, clerking for us. So this is Amalia Koloki-Halfisi, recently joining us from the city of Burlingame. We're very excited to have her, and I'm sure you're going to see a lot more of her here at the commission.
Fabulous, welcome. Okay. And so that takes us on to consent items. Item 1 is a report by the planning administrator on the use permit determination for the office at 71 Bildrake Way. This is a consent item, so we do not need a staff report. So then before opening it to public comment, I'm going to reread our advisement that public meetings are a limited public forum, meaning that there are rules for commenting at these meetings. Comments on non-agendized items must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city, and comments on agendized items must relate to that specific item. If comments do not fall into one of these categories, the city will provide you with another warning to stay within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city or on topic. If the warning is not followed, the chair will direct the city clerk to cut off the microphone, and throughout this warning system, I will seek the assistance of the assistant city attorney in identifying comments not related to the agenda item or not within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. So, do we have any public comment on item 1, the consent calendar? I don't have any speaker cards up here. Nope. Okay, with that, I will close public comment. Do any commissioners have questions, or would anyone like to make a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion that we approve consent calendar as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Ferguson. That vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. And that takes us to item 2, continued public hearings. This is continuation of the June 2nd, 2025 adjourned public hearing regarding the proposed rezoning program. May we have a staff report, please?
Sorry, I'm getting set up here. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair Hauser, Vice Chair Berman, and commissioners. I'm joined here tonight by Deputy Director Harkusha, Assistant City Attorney Murphy, to present the PC-directed revisions to the rezoning program. Also joining us online are Mr. Hamilton from Good City Company, Ms. Murray from Van Meter Williams Pollock, and Mr. Cohn from M Group. So tonight, we'll just do a brief overview of the housing element to date, summarize the Planning Commission's rezone hearings, talk through the PC-directed changes to the general plan and zoning amendments, the state requirements for by-right development, the Sanchez Art Center or Site 23 rezoning program options, the proposed maps, and the recommended motion. We're going to do a truncated version of this, but the housing element work started in 2022 after the adoption of the comprehensive general plan update. After multiple community meetings, study sessions, public hearings, the City Council adopted a housing element in January of 2024. We received comments from the Housing Community Development, or HCD, which is the agency that is charged with certifying housing elements, that our housing element did not comply with state law. The result or the implications of not having a housing element that complies, we are required to complete our rezoning program before we can obtain certification from the state. And we're also subject to builder's remedies. So those are applications for housing development projects that are not subject to local general plan and zoning requirements. So after much coordination between staff and HCD, the City Council adopted an updated housing element in March of 2025, just a few months ago. HCD provided a formal letter saying that once we completed our rezoning program, our housing element would, as revised, would be found in substantial compliance with state law. So that is where we are today. So the purpose of these amendments is to ensure compliance with state housing law and our housing element program. The general plan amendments and rezoning to meet RENA, you'll hear this a lot tonight, HEI1, that's Housing Element Implementation Program 1. This will enable certification by HCD, and it will provide the regulatory framework for the city to meet its RENA goals. Oh, and I should say, sorry, RENA is Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Director Harkusha.
Thank you, Director Updegrave. I'll provide a brief overview of Planning Commission's role in reviewing and shaping the rezoning program, and then go through the directed changes that the Planning Commission made across the multiple hearings. Over the 2 meetings, the Commission provided detailed feedback that informed the updates presented today. On May 19th, the Commission reviewed the overall framework and took action to recommend rezoning of Site 19. At the continued hearing on June 2nd, the Commission recommended action on Sites 38I and J and provided detailed direction on zoning ordinance language. Today's meeting builds on those discussions, incorporating the Commission's input into updated text and map amendments. Staff has reviewed and documented Planning Commission's direction from those past 2 meetings, and incorporated the resulting changes in the draft general plan and zoning code, and also updates to the general plan, land use map, and zoning maps. The full detailed changes are included in the red line text and assessed in the staff report for reference. The first update draft is the draft general plan amendments. Based on the commission's feedback, the general plan now includes clearer land use definitions and establishes a minimum floor area ratio, or FAR, for applicable districts. These changes strengthen policy intent and improve transparency. As you can see here, the first direction we received was to define the vague term of mixed use and mixed use institutional, and refined it and described it in detail of what a mixed use and what a mixed use institutional use are in the general plan. As I mentioned, we revised the table as PC directed to include the minimum FAR allowance in the general plan, and did similarly to the density ranges in each land use designation where applicable. The first section in the zoning ordinance amendments will go through definitions and height. We took PC's direction and added a definition for mixed-use residential and clarified how building height is measured. So this included new approaches for sloped lots and also in considering various roof types. These refinements are intended to promote consistency and context-sensitive design. The next section, we updated the height standards. So based on PC direction, we moved the height of buildings definition that was originally in the definition section of the zoning code to the height section for clarity, which is a separate article. Specifically, building height will now be measured from the average of the highest and lowest finished grade points beneath the building footprint up to the highest point of the roof for specifically the new districts that we're proposing. For sloped, hipped, gabled, mansard, or gambrel roofs, measuring height to a point midway between the ridge and the eave plate is proposed to account for the roof variations. We also revised the retaining wall height measurement to provide clarity that the measurement will be from the lower ground level when there's a difference in grade on either side. The next section that was updated in the zoning ordinance pertained to rooftops and elevators. So the rooftop elements now have uniform standards across all the new zones. Elevator projections are limited to 12 feet, and we removed the exception for energy efficient elevators. We've also clarified language to ensure all rooftop features are subject to consistent rules, including screening where feasible. The residential parking standards were updated in the zoning ordinance. As you can see here, we updated the number of parking spaces for the 2+ bedrooms, so we modified it back to 2 spaces per unit. With 2+ bedrooms, we modified the guest parking back to 1 per 5 units, excluding 1 bedrooms and studios. We are also revised the ordinance to allow tandem parking for the same unit and removed enclosed parking requirements for 2-family and multifamily family uses. For the non-residential parking standards, we aligned them with prior plans and updated to clarify the review processes for shared parking. So updated the office parking to 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and updated the shared parking for mixed-use residential requiring Planning Commission review and approval, and shared parking for non-residential uses would require zoning administrator approval. As directed by the Planning Commission, we updated the higher density and higher density mixed-use districts article, specifically the text to clarify the design standards, specifically for step backs and stoops in this article. This is a slide listing all of the updates to the permitted and conditional uses for all the districts. So as directed by the Planning Commission, we removed the firearm sales, marijuana testing operations, and single-family uses. We also have a specific reference to state law as it pertains to ADUs and JDUs, and we provide clarifying numbering updates throughout, so it's consistent with all the numbers in the zoning code. The mixed-use district requirements, we added to the general provisions a section requiring that mixed-use residential developments meet the minimum floor area ratio for the non-residential component, while also ensuring at least 50% of the total gross floor area is dedicated to residential use. So this will specifically require meeting the minimum FAR per the zoning district for non-residential uses for mixed-use districts. For the institutional or mixed-use institutional districts, we specify a mixed-use residential term in the general provisions. Since the proposed zoning district doesn't have a commercial requirement, we still are providing this mixed-use residential term requiring that proposed development be a mix of uses. Did I skip one? This slide shows the update to the mixed-use institutional district sections. We added institutional and cultural uses and accessory uses, and removed the general commercial uses as directed by the Planning Commission. Additionally, revised the height to the original building height proposed, since institutional uses are not required to propose the 15-foot floor-to-floor commercial space. The rezoning program includes updates to the general plan, land use, and zoning maps. In addition to the citywide map, these include enlarged section maps that provide a clear parcel level view, and staff is working with the consultant to verify the existing land use and zoning designations, as well as propose changes to ensure accuracy, and will correct the typographical errors, if any, before bringing the rezoning program to the City Council in August. And I will pass it back to Director Updegrave.
Thank you, Deputy Director Harkusha. So we wanted to bring back some information about by right processing. At the May 19th meeting, the Planning Commission had requested the City Attorney's Office to conduct further research on state law requirements for by right development before bringing the rezoning program to City Council. But since the rezoning program has come back to the Planning Commission, that research has been completed, and staff have revised the proposed ordinance to better reflect the direction from Planning Commission. So the proposed changes remove the by right overlay or by right combining district to reduce confusion and clarify that under state law, a project must meet all of the eligibility criteria to proceed ministerially under the government code. The eligibility requirements were moved into the Article 54 higher density residential and higher density mixed use districts, which applies to the only applies within the new districts that are created. And the proposed code references state law, provides all of the eligibility criteria, and requires adherence to the mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program from the rezoning EIR. The second issue that the Planning Commission requested additional information about is the Sanchez Art Center, or Site 23. Planning Commission raised concerns about preserving art uses on the site. So Site 23 is a buffer site, meaning it's not required to meet our core RENA, but it would provide zoned potential for an additional 130 lower income dwellings on a city-owned parcel. Although the housing element explicitly states the city's intention to retain art programming while incorporating affordable or mixed-income housing on the site, should they proceed with redevelopment, it states that the site could accommodate mixed-use development incorporating the art center and adding 130 lower-income residential units. But the Planning Commission did request additional information about Site 23 based on community feedback. So staff discussed the Planning Commission and community concerns with HCD about Site 23, and they confirmed that Site 23 could be removed from the rezoning program given the city's adequate buffer for lower income units, but remain listed in the housing elements site inventory. However, if the city does not achieve sufficient lower income housing production, the site may be required to be used in the future to comply with state law. So there are two options for the Planning Commission to consider, both of which would allow the rezoning program to move forward and complete the certification process. The first option would be to recommend removal of Site 23 from the rezoning program. This would allow the city to revisit the site through a future standalone rezoning effort with additional public engagement and more site-specific standards. Option two is to recommend inclusion of Site 23 in the zoning program, which would apply the MUI 50 general plan and objective development standards of the zoning district as developed by the Planning Commission. Oops, see that on my computer and not the. Sorry about that. Oh. So the recommended motion before you tonight would adopt the resolutions recommending approval to the City Council, including certification of the EIR and adopting the findings of fact, statement of overriding considerations, and MMRP, and amend the general plan and zoning ordinance and adopt revisions to the land use and zoning maps. So the next steps are for the Planning Commission to hear public comment, to continue deliberations, provide any final action, and consider adoption of the resolutions recommending approval of the rezoning program. So that concludes staff presentation, but my colleagues and I are available to answer questions and provide any clarification. And then just in closing too, I just wanted to really thank the Planning Commission for your time and engagement throughout this process that has spanned years. At this point, the Commission has done just a tremendous amount of work to bring the rezoning program to where it is today. So including these past 3 hearings, but also in the preceding year. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to commission questions. I want to make it really clear that this is just questions. We're not going to do deliberation. But I want to get any questions for staff that we think can't wait until after public comment out. And then just so that everybody understands my plan for tonight, I want to do what Vice Chair Berman did when we redid the general plan update and what we did last time at the STR, which is we're going to go section by section and just make sure that no one has any edits, or if they have edits that we voice them. And then what I'm going to do, and Director Updegrave, this is more so that we can be consistent, is I'll take notes on the document and I'll send the final document with all of everyone's agreed upon notes to you, if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hauser.
Wonderful. Okay, so with that, does anyone have questions for the chair? I'm sorry, for the director?
Quick comment, just almost unrelated. I wanted to thank staff for one of the better polished and more well-done presentations I've seen in the 5 years I've been up there.
And staff reports.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was not a question. No, just kidding. Does anyone have questions for staff?
Do you?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll go first, but my question comes to the end of our former deliberation. So in Article 67, the combining districts, I know we previously talked about there was formerly language proposed on so sites that have multiple APNs, developing them jointly. And I didn't see any acknowledgement of that comment. However, in the revised zoning of Article 67, I think it does address the comment because it effectively eliminated that language and doesn't require any, I forget what the term that was used before, but joint development between separate APNs. But I just wanted to make sure my interpretation of that is correct.
Thank you. That provision was eliminated through, I think, the reworking of the by right combining district. There's sites that are comprised of multiple APNs are already a single site in terms of the zoning and the housing element. And then adjoining sites can always develop, can always propose development together, depending on the circumstances. It may or may not require a parcel merger, but that is something that is just allowed and governed, I think, outside of the rezoning program.
Yeah, and that was effectively the basis of my former comment. And I found what the previous iteration said. It said, other sites made up of multiple parcels are to be treated as one contiguous site. And I took issue with that, but that no longer appears. So I won't have a comment on it, but I just wanted to make sure that was acknowledged the way that I interpreted. Thanks.
Vice Chair, are you saying that you were concerned that if there were 3 parcels and someone only had the rights to 2, it would prohibit development, but that has been taken out, so you're not concerned?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To follow up on that, because it's very similar, it's not really a question about the staff report, but 16A and B, we had a public comment about that it's being treated as a contiguous parcel, but it's owned by 2 separate owners, and they felt it would put significant and undue, hang on, it's in my notes, impediment to development. And it was to meet the 16-unit minimum, and the suggestion was, could they not treat it as a contiguous site, but still require that the 16-unit minimum be met with those 2 sites, if that makes sense?
And yeah, that was, in our previous meeting, that was one of the sites I was concerned with,
Yeah.
because it's an example of 2 APNs that are actually owned by separate owners but make up one site. So developing it contiguously could be a challenge.
Yes.
But from what I'm seeing, and I don't want to get into deliberation, but from what I'm seeing in the language that's proposed tonight, I don't see any restriction involving contiguous development across APNs on a site. It's just acknowledged that it's one site made up of multiple APNs.
Okay. So are we thinking then that that does not impose a significant and unnecessary constraint? And maybe this is something we return to, because I'm still a little fuzzy on it, but I wanted to address this person's concern.
Yeah, I think we could return to it.
Yes, Director.
I do believe that 16A is able to develop separately and still meet the 16-unit minimum.
Okay. Thank you.
And I believe, but I would defer to Deputy Attorney Murphy. I believe that in other cities this is done regularly in practice, where a different property owner owns it and they do a portion of the project on their site without hindrance.
Yes, that's correct. And of course, the adjoining property owners could co-apply, as was noted earlier.
Yeah, but you could also have like 2 different housing element projects with 2 different owners later.
That's correct.
Anything else?
I may have a couple other, but can I wait till after public comment?
Absolutely. And I think that as we go through this, a lot of I think let's get our questions out prior to public comment that would pertain and help the public maybe.
Yeah.
And then we can reserve everything else for our deliberation.
Yeah. Which was why I asked the 16A and B question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've read option 1 and option 2 probably 6 times at least, and I still am confused about it. They're very similar. Hopefully, I'm not the only one. Could you further explain option 1 and option 2 on site 23? They're similar in nature, but still vastly different.
Thank you, Commissioner Redfield. So Site 23 is listed as a buffer site. So within the housing element, there are 2 types of sites. A core site, which is required to meet that minimum number. Now, oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember. I think it's 18,092 units. And then we're also required to provide additional sites or buffer sites in case, those other lots aren't developing according to, what we thought they would, and particularly for, important for lower income units. So Site 23 is a buffer site and has a buffer for 130 lower income units. If we were to remove that site from the rezoning program, we still have a healthy buffer for lower income sites, and so HCD said that could be removed from the rezoning program. So in other words, we don't have to rezone it now, and we could still move forward with certification. If that's the direction from the Planning Commission, we would remove Site 23 from the general plan and the zoning maps, and then if there's any references within, I think there's a reference within the polygon section of the code, we would remove references to that. That would allow the City Council to direct more site-specific or a standalone rezone if that was the direction that they wanted to go. So HCD confirmed that would not impact our certification of our housing element if we don't rezone that now. The second option is status quo. You can leave it in the rezoning program or recommend leaving it within the rezoning program for the MUI 50 zoning.
So essentially, option 1, just for clarification, removes that specific site without any penalty per se to the housing element moving it forward. Option 2, the wording in that was to amend zoning and general plan land use designation of Site 23 along with the 30 other sites identified in the housing element. So that sounds
That's correct.
highly problematic. And I mean, that's what I'm coming up with on that, so.
Sorry, what is highly problematic?
The 30 other sites, it includes, along with the 30 other sites. So amend the zoning, the way it's worded, along with the 30 other sites identified in the housing element sites inventory.
Oh, I can clarify that, Commissioner Redfield. Currently, there are 31 sites that are being rezoned or that are proposed for rezoning, and Site 23 is one of them. And so that's just intended to say that it would just stay in the current package.
Got it. Thank you.
So to build off of that and just simplify and let me know if this is correct. So option 1 is to remove Site 23 from the rezoning. So it would effectively remain as it was zoned 2 years ago.
Or as it is now.
Or as it is now, I guess, to say. And then option 2 is effectively what has been proposed in front of us for the past couple of months.
That's correct, Vice Chair Berman.
Can I ask another clarifying question about option 1? So if the affordable housing units are not met, then this site can be put back on the docket for a potential rezone? And what would that process look like?
Yeah, that would be at the discretion of the City Council if they wanted to pursue a standalone rezone. And so there are sort of statutory requirements that go along with rezoning So we'd have to get direction from city council, there would be public engagement, it would come to planning commission, just like this rezoning is, right? So it would be similar to this process for the rezoning part. Throughout that, I mean, it's a city-owned parcel, and so that's just kind of the rezoning, should they choose to do that.
Okay, I think I misinterpreted it to be something along the lines of, if by this time in nature we don't get to our goal, then this goes right back. It seemed a little more streamlined, but that's encouraging. Thank you for the clarification.
Another clarification question, actually, that I just noticed on the zoning maps for Site 23. So the proposed zoning map on packet page 82 has, Site 23, it has the MFH overlay, but the underlay, the base hatch, is the green agriculture. Is that supposed to be revised?
My packet pages are cut off, I'm sorry. The zoning would be MUI 50 with the MFH overlay or combining district.
Is the hatch in plan view incorrect?
What packet page was this again? 82?
So yes, so this is part of our overlying, or that Deputy Director Harkusha was talking about, needing to really go through the maps with a fine-tooth comb. The resolution includes a table with all of the rezoning. So we'll investigate that, but it does look like that may need to be fixed.
Which house? The red one?
So,
Is that right?
no, so packet page 82, and then go to plan view. Like, not the legend. And then, so zoom into 23, the underlaying, the color hatch is green,
Oh,
but I think it's supposed to be,
MUI 50,
yeah,
but it's still
like a
parks.
pink.
I see, okay. Oh, that's
But then
very
I think it shows up correctly in the next zoning map occurrence, which is packet page, is it
It's like
215,
149 or
147?
something. Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, as long as we catch it, because that's kind of a big deal.
So your concern is with the underlying zoning, not the crosshatching? Or, I just want to make sure I understand your question, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, in packet page 82.
Yes.
And our entire zoning map, the way it's been revised, we have solid color hatches that identify the zoning district. And I think the intent of what's supposed to show on this map is that Site 23 has a pinkish red color, the MUI 50, because right now it has a green color. So I think it's just
The zoning
an
map-
AutoCAD error.
The zoning map shows the current PF zoning
Yeah.
color, but the general plan map shows the proposed MUI 50 color.
Yeah, it shows the green agriculture color.
And honestly, I think because there's a 23 discussion to be had anyway, like this is like.
It might
I
go
think-
back.
Yeah, I think what we probably want to do is talk about it, but to the vice chair's point, we should do a full, just like scrub of the colors.
Yes, and my understanding of why it's green is because it's agricultural and that it has to remain agricultural because it would require a vote of the people to change it, but agricultural housing would be allowed if it was rezoned. But if it stays as is, it would still stay agricultural.
So
For
then,
23?
for site, so that's the case for site 23?
That's correct.
So then, when the zoning map occurs again on packet page 147, it's hatches pink. So then is it supposed to be green there? I guess, I mean, we could visit it later, but the two maps that I'm looking at, packet page 82 and 147, site 23 has two different colors. And I think what was intended to be presented to us is a consistent color between the two maps.
So they're different maps. So packet page 82 is the zoning map, and packet page 147
Oh, it's the land use
is the
map.
land use map.
Well, but then still,
So look at it zoomed in. It's split zoned currently, and the polygon is the part that's MUI.
That's
MU
being
50, which is like the red and the red hatch on the zoning.
but then on the zoning map, it's shown as green. It should still be, if it's going to be green in the zoning map, showing that it's agriculture, and if we need it to show as agriculture, regardless of what the polygon is, then the land use map should it be something similar?
The land use designation would be changed to MUI 50.
But I guess and then maybe this is just kind of confusing because we should probably show more information than we actually need to in our zoning, but, or in our land use, because the land use map has MUI 50 as an option in the legend, but it's not being used for site 23, but then it is being used for site 23, sorry. But then MUI is also an option in the zoning map, and it's not being used for site 23.
Yeah, so they are different designations, even though they have the same name. And so what I'm understanding is that there are different requirements for the zoning related to the agricultural.
So could you direct us to the table you referred to where it said? Oh, sorry, could you direct us to the table you referred to where it says what it currently is? Because I thought it was currently PF, not agricultural.
The table starts on packet page 64.
Thank you.
And as a point of clarification about listing the MUI in the legend, I believe, at least from looking at the maps, MUI 50 is for other zoning or other sites that are on the map, so that's why it's listed in the legend. But there's a little note on the bottom left of that, that key that states other parcels. Sorry, I think I lost the page. There's basically a note that says that the parcels that do not have a specific zone change, they're not listed in the legend. So it says no parcels existing within the following zones are not listed. So it has a list there on the M2 districts, RM, R.3 LD, and the special area zoning districts.
So I think that the map needs more clarification, and I think we'll probably all have comments on it. And I think the interesting thing here is like the polygons versus the underlying, right? So that's also like a nuance. Why don't we save this, if you don't mind, Vice Chair, to after public comment?
Sure.
Okay. Does anyone have more questions? Okay, I'm sure there are gonna be a lot of questions, but we're gonna go to public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please fill out a yellow speaker card or raise your hand on Zoom, or press, is it star 5? Planner Lynn?
Chair, we have one raised hand.
We have one raised hand. Okay, so that is the one comment that we will take. I'm going to be pretty quick here, and so if people want to raise their hands, they should do it right now. Give them 10 more seconds. Okay, still one caller?
We have one more raised hand.
Okay, so we'll take those 2 raised hands after we take public comment. I do not have any speaker cards. Okay. Oh, sorry. This one. So we'll give everybody a second for speaker cards, and I'm just going to reread this. Public meetings are a limited public forum, meaning that there are rules for commenting at these meetings. Comments on non-agendized items must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city, and comments on agendized items must relate to that specific item. If comments do not fall into one of these categories, the city will provide you with a second warning to stay within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city or on topic. If the warning is not followed, the chair will direct the city clerk to cut off the microphone, and throughout this warning system, I will seek the assistance of the assistant city attorney in identifying comments not related to the agenda item or not within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. Okay, and the first person will be Cabot Shelley. Followed by Cindy Abbott, and then Gail Benton Shoemaker.
Hello, good evening. My name is Cabot Shealy. I've been in Pacifica for 45 years now. Live on Rosita. I am the owner of 721 Odstad Boulevard. I don't know what site number that is. I was scrambling to try to find out what it was. Does anybody have that? And my apologies, I would have come earlier in the process, except that I believed that there was a process that had been going for quite a while, and but it sounds like a lot of things have changed. The way I found out was somebody was checking on my property and said, oh, that's being zoned something different, and they're putting an overlay on it, which is going to put huge restrictions on the property. It seems to be that the polygon overlay seems to be a pretty confusing thing. In one case, it was considered to be a minimum in trying to get the state to get off our backs on the housing element and so forth. But then it sounds like it got put into the plans here and into the rezoning as an overlay as well, and is being treated as a maximum instead of a minimum. And the polygons are kind of based on assumptions, rough outlines, and stuff like that, which is very concerning, because when you have something that has not been really vetted through and so forth, and it puts a limitation, and as we know, how long has it been since the rezoning for Pacifica started? My knowledge, it's been 2 decades or something that the whole process started. I've been waiting 25 years. I've been the owner for 25 years. My big concern is that over the years, I've had lots of proposals that were brought to me, which I turned down. And the reason I turned them down is this is my city. And my wife and I, when we go for our walks, we walk right past this property, and I don't want to see an eyesore there. I don't want to see something that somebody wiggled into the zoning, because we've seen that, we've all seen that, where a zoning was a specific way. Instead of having a nicer project, somebody massaged theirs into something that didn't even make sense. So I'd like a little actually clarification on it, and I'm sorry I didn't look at the clock.
Thank you. Yeah, and if we, so that's your time, but if we could please have the 1 minute little, maybe I missed it. And we can't answer questions or have a conversation now, but the planning commission can re-ask your question once we're done with public comment.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And I would love to talk with people to kind of explain how this affects a lot of things.
Thank you for your comment.
Could I ask if he could
Cindy
repeat
Abbott?
the address? I'm sorry, could he repeat the address?
I believe he's talking about site F.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy Abbott, followed by Gail Benson Shoemaker, followed by Sue Degree.
Hello there, Cindy Abbott. Hope everybody had a nice long weekend. Because it was a long weekend and not anticipating public comment, we thought we'd save everybody some time tonight and hope that you've read all the public comment letters that have been being submitted over the past couple of months. And so there's just a few of us here tonight to speak to you, not thinking that we would be speaking to you. We appreciate the staff time of reaching out to HCD and trying to get some clarification about the buffer sites. And option 1 with regard to Site 23, Sanchez Art Center, which I'd like to remind everybody does not just include Sanchez Art Center. It includes the Mildred Owen Concert Hall operated by Pacifica Performances. It includes the Rotary Plaza. It includes the Sanchez Fields, and it includes the Sanchez Dog Park. So a lot of beloved community assets there on the single campus that's being talked about as one singular location. So I like to make sure everybody's aware of that. But we really think that option 1 is the right way to go for you to vote on tonight, and it's what is actually in sync with the March 2025 approved housing element. So you're not doing anything radical or out of line. The housing element that City Council just reviewed and approved in March actually says that studies would be done prior to any rezoning on this site. In fact, it specifically says the city will conduct a fit study to determine the feasibility of future efforts at Sanchez Library and Sanchez Art Center, and subsequently examine if rezoning or redesignation would be appropriate. So I'm looking forward to that action being taken tonight to remove Site 23 and all of its collective uses from the housing element rezoning. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, Gail, followed by Sue Degree, and then Misha Flores, and that is all the cards I have.
Hello. I also thought there wasn't going to be public comment. I usually write my comments thoroughly, but I will give it my best shot. I'm here also in support of the Sanchez Art Center complex as a citizen, but I have to say that in the general plan, that property is considered a park. And it's actually part of the PBNR's current parks review process. And I would hate to think that city parks are actually in the general plan. There is a standard of green space and parks for a community, and Pacifica doesn't meet it. Nowhere close, particularly since schoolyards have been closed off. There's less green space, fewer parks for the citizens. That is really the standard in the general plan. And so I would hate to see any park rezoned into something else. I obviously don't understand all the zoning, or else there would be a park zoning. But I wanted to make a comment in support of that entire property as one of our assets and a park in Pacifica. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sue, followed by Misha Flores.
Hi, you're appointed and staff doesn't have anything other than be staff and do what they're told to do. I agree with, I think you're probably going to listen to Cindy and Gail because they're more specific to Site 23. I guess, especially during the holiday, 1776 came to mind again. If you also read the things that we send in, you know, stepping back, like the gentleman here, it's like, what the heck's going on? I look up definitions, I looked up what is a general plan. General plan expresses the community's development goals and embodies public sentiment. What RENA has done, what state legislators have done, is come on from on high, talk about kingship and dictatorship, come on from on high and said, hey, this is a mandate, and guess what? You're going to be punished. We're talking to citizens here, citizens, and what's happening to Sanchez and the fields and the community, music, even the dog park. Those things were a lot of public input. That's what the community wanted. That's what the community built. That's what the community trusted. That's going to remain because the community wants it. It's our character. This is what troubles me the most. So I'm a citizen, not on council anymore, not a planning commissioner, not an employee. As a citizen, I'm just terrified and irritated. And the Sanchez Art Center and specific language for these things that the community created, dreamed of, created, worked for, kept all these years, somehow we're allowing electeds not from here to just mandate. And oh my God, the punishment part, talk about frightening, I'm scared.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, Misha Flores.
Hello. I wasn't prepared to speak either, but I'm going to say something really fast. Just that this art center means so much to so many people. Artists everywhere come from all over the place to participate in the studios, to have their businesses out of there. And the fact that we get to show artists from all over to our local community for free is really amazing because we have really great shows there. And the PBC rents the hall, and the churches rent the hall, and the old ladies get together for knitting on Wednesdays. And it's just really amazing community, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I hope that you guys appreciate that you don't even have to spend any money on it to have it there. It's just already there, and it's already perfect. And I really hope you'll try to keep it. We're really counting on you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wish that I was so eloquent when I was unprepared as all of you were. Okay, we will go to the two callers on Zoom.
Arthur Keller, you may go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about I'm looking at the map on page 82 in the packet. Site F does not look like this says what it is. It's supposed to be a brown, light brown site or beige. Looks like a orange site, which not according to R40 zoning. Looks like it's orange instead of light brown. In addition, same thing about the site on the other map. Does not look like R40. Looks like some other color. So I like to check the colors, make sure that they're correct. In fact, they look somewhat off. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay.
Dinah Verby, you may go ahead and unmute yourself.
Greetings, and thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to staff for all the work and for attempting to answer the community's questions. I am very much in favor of removing Site 23 from the rezoning program. I would like it removed from the housing element as well, but for now, if this is what the Planning Commission can do, I would like it removed. A couple of questions around that I'm hoping perhaps you can ask staff to clarify. First of all, in the previous packet from May 19th, Table 1, the sites of proposed land use changes, showed Site 23 as being MUI 40. Tonight, it's proposed to be MUI 50. That's in the staff report, and that was in staff's presentation. Is it being upzoned if it is rezoned? So can we clarify, is it supposed to be MUI 40 or 50? My other comment is, if site 23 is removed, does that mean that there will not be any fit studies done and no more money spent by the city in pursuit of the fit studies? And also, I know I sound like a broken record, but we keep emphasizing the fact that the existing campus and buildings are what the community wants preserved. And yet we keep seeing in staff reports language that differs from that. The language keeps coming back as the intent is to preserve existing arts uses. And that's a very different concept. And I don't want to, dwell on it overly, but I don't understand why that language hasn't been clarified to say that we want existing uses. And that leads me to my last question, which is, it was previously asked by the commission to have language in some document somewhere that signified that intent. And I want to know, is that language still going to be there to protect the existing structures, even if it's removed from the rezoning program? So I hope you can ask staff to clarify those tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for additional questions and deliberation. I'm going to start by re-asking some of the community questions that we heard. I think the first question that I would love to make sure that we're on the same page about is, I am looking at the Table 1 HE sites on 64, and I am seeing the MUI 40 on site 23, but I also think I saw MUI 50 somewhere as well. I can't remember where it was. Can we just clarify what it is?
Thank you, Chair Hauser. It is MUI 40.
Okay.
There's a typo in the staff report that I repeated in the presentation.
Okay, but in the actual rezone document?
It's MUI 40 as originally directed by the Planning Commission. That's correct.
Okay. And then can we get some clarification on site F that one of the community members asked about? And I believe the 20-year process that was referred to was the general plan update that was finished a couple of years ago. So maybe just separating the nuance between that and this.
I'm not sure that I understand your question, Chair Hauser.
Sure. Before your time, we had a general plan from 1980, and we did a general plan update, and I want to say 2022.
It's probably when it was adopted.
That is correct.
But it's-
Okay.
Yeah.
And that did take about 20 years from start to finish. So I would love if staff could, clarify the difference between that process and this process, and then maybe speak a little bit to whether or not Site F is being rezoned and how.
Yes, so the housing element work started after adoption of the general plan. And so the analysis that was done on the sites that ultimately ended up being in the housing element sites inventory was somewhat independent of that general plan update. So you'll note that I think the majority of the sites selected for rezoning, if not all of them, do require changes to the land use designation in the general plan. So it would be different than that general plan 2040 process. The housing element is part of the general plan, and so it's also amending the general plan. Did I answer the question?
I think I would love to hear what you're about to say, and then I have one more follow-up question that's polygon related.
And just then that the rezoning program is then the implementation of the housing element and those general plan amendments.
For sites with the polygon overlay. And this kind of feeds into what the vice chair was asking, but also what the community member was asking. So, for example, if a site is zoned, in this case MUN, and there's a polygon on it that changes the polygon to R40, does the whole parcel get rezoned, or is there a split zoning between MUN and R40?
It would be split zone.
Okay.
Adding on to that, then, should our zoning map show the polygons? And I know that might be hard at the scale our zoning map is, but if it's split zoned, we should probably show it.
And I believe when we do the section maps, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we have those detailed section maps. And so that is one of the things that we'll be working on so that we can show more of the parcel level detail. Is very difficult to capture in the large citywide map.
One. Okay, so we'll have, similar to what's in our current general plan, we'll have Pacifica, the zoning map will be broken up.
The
in,
north,
like,
the central, the south, the southeast, correct.
with the intent to show the polygon zonings.
Correct, and the same with the zoning map itself. I don't know when our zoning maps were created, but they are very old PDFs, and so we're working on digitizing those as part of this process and including the section levels, the section breakout.
And making those available online like a GIS or something. That's a whole nother discussion, but that would be great.
GIS is definitely a project in the works, but I'd love to get some color PDFs at a minimum.
Sure.
Yeah, no more like look at the square. I think the polygons are technically on the zoning map in the red. It's just really, it's like you have to really zoom in. And so I love what Director Updegrave was saying about doing what we've done in past land use documents, which is like having the zoom ins. So maybe that can be, as we go through tonight, maybe that can be part of the discussion on maps. Does anyone have, oh, go ahead.
One more clarifying question. I think single parcel rezones outside of this, polygon or otherwise, are pretty normal, right? When we do a single parcel project approval based on a specific project plan. So I don't think having a polygon overlay would be a huge hindrance to some future project if it needed to not stay within the boundaries of this polygon, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I had one more clarifying questions about previous actions. So for actions that were taken at past commission meetings where the zoning map shows the overlays that were removed, can those retroactively then be removed from the little snippets? I guess.
Are you talking about like site 19?
Talk about site 38, because that's the one I'm not. Yeah, so like site 38, like we approved, and I think it had the BR overlay that was removed. Right? We made a motion to approve site 38 at the last meeting. And so the map that was done was the old map, but whatever is moving forward is going to be the new. Like there's only going to be one map. We're not going to present it. Okay, that's
correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
That's one of mine.
Perfect. So then before we get into everything, why don't we start with site 23?
Is there another?
Did you have another question you wanted to ask before we get into 23, Vice Chair?
I'm trying to think if there's another public comment question that we wanted to re-ask.
I think the first and the last commenter had the majority of questions, and I feel like I asked the last caller's question, but not there were two of them, and I missed one.
Okay.
But I feel like the deciding on site 23 will potentially make some of those questions null.
Right, yeah.
So let's start there. I really appreciate that staff reached out to HCD because I know that that was a lot of work to get clarified between meetings. So with the clarification that this is a rezoning program and we are not taking action on the housing element, which is not at this point our purview, council's purview. Do we want to go with option 1, remove site 23 from the rezoning, or option 2, proceed with moving site 23 to council? And at this point, I'm happy to poll or have deliberation.
Quick poll? Just
Yeah,
see
go
where
ahead.
we're at.
Let's do a poll. We'll start with Commissioner Devine and move down the line.
1.
1,
1.
2.
2, 1.
1.
Okay, so we have consensus 6-1 to remove site 23 from the rezoning program.
Do we want to, is there any, Commissioner Godwin, did you want to deliberate at all or hear anyone's points? Otherwise, I'm happy to continue moving forward.
It seems like the commission has a pretty solid consensus of what they want to do. I don't see the point of arguing and coming to the same conclusion in 10 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
I have to say, I was shocked not to get this much pushback on the other 38 sites.
Well, I think one of the things that is important to remember and also sometimes hard to swallow is that we did like 4 study sessions where we allowed 6 minutes per commenter on public comment, 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. And I wish that the outpouring of comment
it
had
happened
come
then.
through that process. So I'm really glad that staff was able to be responsive this late in the game, and I really appreciate it. So, okay, site 23 is removed from the rezoning program. Does staff need any clarification? We'll put that into the motion as well if we can get to one tonight. Perfect. Okay. Then I would like to go through, starting on packet page 59, because the staff report, whether we agree or not, is not really material in my opinion. If anyone disagrees, feel free to jump and ask clarifying questions, but I would like to start with the resolution. And I do have comments on the resolution, but I will go last. Does anyone have comments on the resolution beside me? Okay, then I am going to go. So starting on packet page 60, I am going to nitpick this a little bit because I think it will be beneficial for where we're going. So I don't have any comments on the whereases, but on packet page 62, I just had a question on item 3, that the Planning Commission does hereby recommend approval to the City Council of the City of Pacifica, map amendment excluding site 19 and 38, but also I and J. Are I and J and 30, like, I know we made a motion on 38. Did we also make a motion on I and J at the last meeting? Yes? I just forgot. Okay. Okay. In this section, I am okay with the idea of adopting the land use plan designation with the concept that we would allow for minor typographical or clerical changes consistent with the intent of this resolution. But I am not comfortable with any minor changes that may be required by California Department of Housing and Community Development. I do not want to put that into our resolution. If council wants to make minor changes that are not in our resolution, that's fine, but I'd like to strike that sentence.
Concur.
Okay?
I would agree.
Okay. So I will, again, I'm going to put an amalgam of the document together on the staff report, and I'll send that out to everybody. Moving on to 64, if we are excluding 1938 I and J, then I believe we should take them out of the list, but I would defer to staff and the city attorney. I just want to make sure we're consistent.
I'm sorry, which page?
Packet page 64 and 66 still contain sites 1938 I and J. And since this is part of the resolution that we're approving, I would opt to take them out since we're specifically including them in our now therefores.
I agree, and then we will put necessary information into the whereas clauses, like, for example, the information from that table into the whereas clauses with the item that was already passed.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to assume that we don't have any legal questions on that, so I'm just going to keep going, but people stop me, please, if we don't have consensus. And then in the findings on page 69, where we're further resolving it, I would like to change the language about internal consistency with the adopted housing element and a couple of the other specific findings so that we are not calling out specific policies. I think it's confusing, and I would like to just make bigger assertions. So for example, at the top of 69, I'd like to rewrite the sentence that says this program directly implements, et cetera, I'd like that to say this program directly implements housing element programs and associated policies. Therefore, the rezoning program is internally consistent. Any concerns about that, or are we okay with that? Okay. No concerns.
May I clarify?
Yes.
Chair Hauser, thank you. So the recommendation was to remove the specific reference to HEI 1 and HEI 3?
Yes. And
HEI
1.2. I think that we are creating consistency with the housing element as a whole, and I would rather not EG it. And I have similar comments as we move to like consistency with the safety element. So, for example, it says sites located in geologically sensitive areas or areas subject to sea level rise or flooding, e.g. some Palmetto Avenue and Rockaway Beach parcels. But I don't think we have any Palmetto Avenue parcel, right? It just creates confusion since there's no housing elements on Palmetto or in the part of Rockaway Beach that is typically referred to as Rockaway Beach. And I would take that out of the consistency with LCLUP policies as well. So we were still saying, for sites located in the coastal zone, the rezoning supports Coastal Act goals, et cetera, but we're taking out portions that are confusing. Because the only sites in the coastal zone here are in Pedro Point.
I do believe, Chair Hauser, that is a direct quote from the safety element. So I believe it's quoting, we can double check, but I thought that was quoting the safety element.
I think it's fine to have the general policy being, we're finding ourselves consistent with the policy, but I think it's really confusing to put in the examples. Okay.
I'd also just like to note there are a few references that I'm seeing to 31 sites, so those would also be modified to 30.
Got it. I will put that into the notes. Thank you very much, Attorney Murphy. Let me do that now. Okay. I believe that was it for the resolution. Does anyone have any comments before we move on or concerns about those changes? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next items, and I'm going to skip the past actions that were taken and move on to, sorry, there's a lot on these sites where past actions were taken. So moving on to page 82, which is the zoning map. Do we want to spend some time here? I think it's worth spending some time here, Vice Chair.
Yeah, and apologies. I was thinking that because, well, I guess the way I read it, it's a little out of order, the attachments.
Yeah.
I would have thought that this would have been the land use map showing up before the general plan updates, which is why I thought I saw this as the zoning map, and then I thought the next map appearing is also the zoning map, because that would, in my head, make sense chronologically. But, so we're looking, the two maps we will be comparing are not comparable because it's zoning and land use, and this one's the land use one. Okay. I mean the zoning one.
But I want to reference something that Senior Director Hakusha said at one of our last meetings. I believe anytime we're changing the land use, we are also changing the zoning to the corresponding zoning district. So it's just the polygons that are going to be confusing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I think there's a couple aspects of the map, of this zoning map, that we want to talk about. What do we want to talk about first?
I mean, I think we should double check all the zoning colors and callouts to conform to the list in the resolution. The list in the resolution seemed to be accurate. So I think when I get the resolution to sign and before this goes to council, can we get the updates that we're making tonight with these changes and I can double check them as I sign the resolution? Is that okay?
I'm sorry, Chair Hauser, on the actual map itself?
I mean, the way we did this on the general plan, and I believe the onus was on the vice chair at the time, was we made a recommendation to council, but past director Murdoch asked us to triple check the red line before going to council so that when we liaised, we could really comfortably say, this took all of the planning commission's recommendations and we're standing by it. And I think, I'm gonna say personally that with some changes, I personally feel like I could approve this tonight. So what I would like to do is just make sure that whatever we talk about tonight, before it goes to council, someone just takes the time to triple check that it's all consistent internally.
Yes, I think that is fine, and if provided that the changes are all incorporated in the motion, you don't need to repeat them all, but the changes that were noted during the conversation, then Chair Hauser, when she is signing the resolution, as you will be required to do, you can look and confirm that.
Okay.
And Chair Hauser will have the updated zoning and land use maps at that point in time?
That I will turn over to.
Or I guess at a minimum, whoever is liaising to city council, if the updated maps could be available to us then, in case there's any unintentional error, we can mention it then.
Well, and I mean, honestly, when we did this with the general plan, what we did was Lauren and I checked every element and the maps and everything. Like, there was one typo and everything was fine. But I think we should do that.
And I think we did that before we liaised.
And I think we should split it.
Okay. Sounds good.
In terms of the maps, I believe we'll have the revised citywide map.
Yeah.
For sure, I think in time for the resolution. We may not have the detailed section maps until we're ready to publish for council, just because it's very time intensive.
I think that's totally fine, because we can zoom in really closely, but just for future patrons of Pacifica looking to make land use entitlements, I think it would be helpful later. So as long as the overall one is fine, I think that works, right?
Yeah, that would be fine with me if I were the liaison.
Okay. You just signed up.
I know, I did.
That makes sense. So one thing that I had on this map that we had kind of talked about, and I love the fact that we added the note. Even though there are no R30 and R50 sites, I still think we should add the colors to the legend for future. And we can say in the note that there's not, I think this is on the land use map later, but I think we can say in the note there's not currently R30 and R50. But I think if it appears in the general plan, it should appear in the map legend.
And then there should be a note stating that there are none, or else someone's gonna go hunting for something that's not there.
Right, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna reach over you. But on the actual general plan one, the note here said it,
right.
which I thought was really helpful. And so if you put color on here.
Yeah, then it works.
Does that work for everybody? Okay.
As an asterisk or
Yeah,
footnote on.
yeah. And just, can we speak into the microphone just so that,
Just as an asterisk or footnote, so it's clear that
Yeah.
there are none of those designations
Yeah.
on the map.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess it'd be the same note as in the land use.
yeah. Okay, so just to clarify for the record, we're gonna double check that the zoning colors conform to the list in the reso. We're gonna add R30 and R50 to the legend, and we're gonna replicate the note on the land use plan on the zoning plan. Okay. All right, any other comments on the zoning map before we move on?
Jumping back to Site 23 and to what Commissioner Davis mentioned, I think Site 23 is supposed to be PF.
Actually, I checked on the table, that's why I asked, and it does say it's AG, it's like AGPF. It's multiples. It's on, if you look at the table on page 65, it really helps to clarify. Because it's not in tiny print, for one thing.
And again, Vice Chair Berman, we are going through very carefully comparing the old or the existing zoning on the old PDF maps with the new to make sure everything is correct.
Okay.
Lauren, do you agree? Was I reading that right on the table?
Yeah, well, what I was looking at before was from our previous packet, Table 1, and it listed existing zoning as PF. No, existing land use. Where's the, no, it is zoning, because it's offset.
This one is public and semi-public is one, and then
Yeah.
park is the split zoning, or is the split general plan, and then there's only one
Right,
zoning
right.
of PF.
Yeah, this table's like skewed. But yeah, so the zoning's PF, the existing.
As a point of clarification, the existing zoning is agricultural / B lot 5, so B lot 5,000 square feet. And then the existing general plan land use is public and semi-public park.
Got that?
So PF.
General plan. Let me go back to the map.
Can I ask one question? I thought the B lots were going away. I thought
Yes.
the B lots were going away.
They are, that's correct.
So then would we remove B-5 from the map, from the zoning map? Under agriculture, it says
We would-
A/B-5.
If we're not rezoning that parcel, we won't be changing any of the zone.
Got it, so B lots are only going away for housing element sites.
That's correct.
Got
For
it.
things that are being rezoned.
Okay, okay.
Sorry to belabor this, but if Site 23 is just one property, it's a part of, in the existing condition, it's a part of 2 zoning districts. It's a part of PF and agriculture.
The existing zoning district?
Yeah.
So the existing zoning district, at least from what I have in my notes, is agriculture and the B lot. I'm not sure where the PF
Oh,
is
because
stating.
all of our material to date has been saying that it's PF,
The general plan designation?
the zoning of Site 23.
We can double check that. That might have been a clerical error, but the land use designation does align with its public and semi-public park.
Got that?
So it might be
Yeah. Got,
referencing that, but we can
no,
double check.
I'm looking at the tables we've been looking at for the past couple of months, and its zoning is listed as PF. But whatever it is, as long as it's right.
So I've added a note to what I'm sending to staff that says remove polygon for site 23, because it goes away, and confirm underlying zoning. Okay.
And thank you for the sanity check.
Yeah, no, well, you said it, and I was like, you know what, I think she is right.
It was from memory, so.
Any other comments on the map before we move into the general plan? I'm gonna keep rocketing through because we're getting home before 11 tonight. Okay, moving on then to the general plan. Does anyone have comments on packet page 83?
Nope.
Okay. On packet page 84, I just want to clarify, there's a statement that says multifamily residential is the primary use intended for this area, but since it's the use intended for the area, should we get rid of the word primary? Because I don't know what else would be, I don't think we allow anything else there.
There are a number of uses that are permitted. So just for example, things like community care facilities.
Got it. Okay.
Things like that.
Okay. Any comments on 85? Okay, I do have one. I'm just going to be a stickler on the minimum FARs. So if we're going to say residential density shall be at 20 to 30, then we should say non-residential shall be at 0.1 to 2.5. We adequately cover it elsewhere in the document, but for consistency, we should say it similarly.
I'm sorry, what page was that?
This is on 85 for all the mixed-use districts. It says residential shall be, so it's prescriptive, and then it says non-residential is allowed from, and I think it should just be consistent across all the designators. Any?
Okay.
I'm seeing head nods. It's fine. Head nods. Okay, enough to have consensus. Anything on 86? Yes. Okay, Commissioner Davis.
So, and it may not be a necessary distinction, but on 86 and also 137, we refer to accessory uses, where on page 52, in the same context, we say accessory commercial uses. I'm not sure it's a distinction that needs to be made, but again, I think it's important that we have consistency.
Does staff have opinions on if we should or should not add commercial?
Where is it on the general plan, Commissioner Davis?
So it originally shows on packet page 52, and it says accessory commercial uses, and that was actually something that PC directed specifically for Site 23, because we wanted to make sure that, well, not just Site 23, but MUI, if they had incidental commercial activity, that could be allowed. And then on packet page 86 and again on 137, it's referred to as just accessory uses. Drop the word commercial.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis, for the clarification. I believe the use of accessory uses within the general plan is because it could also apply to uses that are accessory to residential. So not just, so whereas in the staff report, that section was talking specifically about incidental commercial uses, this is a more broad description within the general plan.
Thank you. That's what I suspected, but I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll leave that one as is. Anything else on 86? Okay. 87? 88? I had one on 88. It's just a typo in note, or actually I have a couple on 88. In note 3, it says 5,000 parcels less than 5,000 square feet may merge, and it should say qualify for the allowable density range instead of quality. And then more important, in note 4, I think we should say the last sentence in note 4, there is no FAR maximum for mixed-use institutional designations. Otherwise, it says there's no FAR, which is confusing. Does everybody agree? Yes. Okay.
Could you say, could you repeat what the change was, Chair Hauser?
Absolutely. So in 3, it's just a typo, and in 4, where it says there is no FAR residential or non-residential, that should say there is no FAR maximum, which is consistent with the rest of the note in the foregoing sentences. So essentially in FAR, there's not a maximum.
I think that the reason why it's written that way is because typically FAR only applies to non-residential uses. However, in some of our mixed-use designations, some of the existing ones, it applies an FA standard specifically to non-residential and residential, which is why this last sentence is written to say that there's no FAR.
Should it say minimum or maximum? I think it needs a clarification.
Yeah, maybe the minimum and maximum,
Okay.
I think would clarify that.
Or requirement?
Yeah.
Because, FAR is floor area ratio, and so I guess it's odd to say
There's
there's
no
no
FAR.
floor
Yeah.
area ratio.
You
I
will
guess-
have one.
Yeah, yeah.
The only reason I noted it is because the foregoing two sentences are super, super clear and only talk about maximums and minimums. So I think minimum or maximum is clarifying. And then, here's my big one. The multifamily housing combining district, I really like that staff removed the BR overlay. I appreciate it. I think in making the multi-housing family combining district, we lost the sentence that was in the previous draft that I think is important, that said, it said essentially that this district is designated to provide multifamily housing in particular portions of parcels where such housing would be appropriate. It does say that in the zoning, but we should keep that sentence in there.
Would you please repeat that?
Yes, at the top of 89, where we've now defined multifamily housing combining district, the description of what the MFHPY was got deleted when we took out the BR. I just want to add that one sentence back in. Otherwise, it's not quite clear what the purpose of the district, the combining district is.
Did you have that sentence? I just want to make sure that we're capturing it correctly.
Yes, it said the MFH before, it said the MFH-PY district is is designed to provide multifamily housing in particular portions of parcels where such housing would be appropriate. And I think you can restate that without the PY designator. You can just say the MFH district is designed to provide multifamily housing, et cetera, et cetera.
So just to confirm, at the top of packet page 89, it looks like there's some of that language in the second sentence.
Yes.
But you're suggesting modifications to that sentence so that it's like two separate sentences?
Sort of. I think, Attorney Murphy, what happened was it had this very general, this is what multifamily combining districts are. And then it said, here's what the MFH-BR is. And then it said, here's what the MFH-PY is. And when we deleted the BR, we also deleted everything after it that was explanatory about the PY. And since we're not getting rid of the polygons, it's really important that we clarify why this combining district exists. So I am restoring staff's sentence that was, I think, erroneously taken out.
Got it. Thank you.
Just looking closer on that, so the MFH combining district, now that we remove the by right, is the only purpose of it for the polygons?
That's correct.
Then I think, although it does add more acronyms, but adding PY could be beneficial. Otherwise, we're just calling it multifamily housing. And yes, I think Chair Hauser's comment to bring that sentence back helps clarify, but I think having the PY helps it's a little more intuitive when you read it. Otherwise, you're looking at this everything before us, and all of it's multifamily housing.
I totally concur with that.
Yeah.
Is staff okay with adding PY?
Yes, if the commission.
I heard Commissioner Davis say, mm-hmm. That's 3. Everybody else okay with PY? Redfield? All nods and agnostic. Okay. So let me just figure out how to make that note so that doesn't go away. The MFH. Okay. Anything else on packet page 89? Okay. Anything on packet page 90? Okay, there is a typo on page 90. Note 4 says there are currently no parcels in R30 or R40, but that should say in R30 or R50. Is that clear to staff?
General question on as I was going through this, I was thinking, I don't remember if we ever asked this question, I'm sure that we did, but for the different mixed use and residential uses where they have a density attached, what happens if a project is proposed at a density below the range that we've provided?
Does not conform. So it would be disallowed because you can't build housing less than, automatically. So if it's 30, it has to be to the 20 to 30. It has to be within the range or
Even
it's
in the
non-compliant.
mixed use?
Even the mixed use would have to be at the minimum density or above. And through a state density bonus could be higher than the upper limit or
You'd
through
have to
our
develop the
density
entire
bonus.
site at a density.
Correct. Or I think, and City Attorney Murphy could correct me if I'm wrong, but we would have to do a general plan amendment and make no net loss findings to down zone.
That's correct.
I just had in my mind some of the larger sites that have topographical issues that if we decided to develop one portion versus the other and it didn't meet the, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
We've talked about it. Move on.
Okay, table 4.3, I just want to be consistent across commercial. So for the column called maximum non-residential FAR, I would really appreciate it if it was retitled to say permitted non-residential FAR range, just the same way that the residential range is defined for internal consistency. Is the commission cool with that? Nods? Yes? Is that okay? Okay. And then we would show the range in that column. Okay, anything on 91? 92? 93? Or 94? Okay, we are officially done with the general plan. Does everyone feel like with these changes they could support the amendments to the general plan?
We're still gonna look at the land use map.
Yes. Yes? 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 Okay, fabulous. So let's move on to the zoning. So we are now on packet page 95. Okay. Does anyone have anything on 95? Okay, on 96, in section 257.2, mixed-use residential, where it says mixed-use residential should mean a development project with both residential and non-residential uses. Is there a reason why we would say non-residential uses instead of commercial?
Thank you, Chair Hauser. Yes, because the MUI, the allowed mixed uses are things like cultural facilities, which aren't necessarily considered a commercial use. So in the definition, we use the broader term.
So in the definition, mixed-use residential, we're including mixed-use institutional as well? Mixed-use residential institutional?
That's
falls under?
correct.
Okay. And you'll have to forgive me because that one has just gone back and forth so many times that I just want to make sure that I understand it. Okay. Any other questions on 96? 97? 98? 99? 100? Um, 101 is where we get into the height limits, and I do want to talk about those because it's brand new. Does anybody have comments or want to start? I had a couple of clarifiers, but I think in general I'm super pleased that we finally added this.
I know we have the diagram for how we measure the heights in existing zoning districts, but we also added the language to clarify how height would be measured in the new zoning districts, and I think it'd be helpful to have a diagram for those. Is that okay? Does anyone disagree?
Does the diagram in here not? Maybe I missed it. I did think it was representative, but maybe I.
We did not create a new diagram for the new height measurement within the zoning ordinance. And so that's something that if PC directs, we could have someone create. We could also create like informational, more like public information handouts on how to measure height.
I think if we are going to give any diagram, we should give both diagrams.
I totally concur with that. I also don't understand why I'm missing
And
that.
it's, so remember, we talked about the average, so we'll measure height based on the average elevation
doesn't go to the
between
midpoint.
lowest adjacent grade and highest adjacent grade, so it would be a line drawn from like roughly the middle of this
To
diagram.
the midpoint of the roof. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to add a note. Does everyone concur that we should have clarifying diagrams? Okay. Before that, I just want to clarify some of the wording to make it a little bit more straightforward. So in A, I think it would be helpful to say building height in the higher density districts, and then just list out the R30 through the MUI 60. And then for little Roman numeral 1, I would love to change it to say on sloped lots with attached units or multiple building sections, such as townhomes, just because I feel like multiple building sections might be confusing. The average grade is determined per individual building, because I think we're in multiple family zoning, so we shouldn't determine it by unit. We should determine it by building, unless I'm missing something. I don't know how by unit would ever apply.
So you want it to say per individual building?
Yeah, per individual building, exactly. Because I don't know honestly, I don't know what the definition of a building segment is. I think it's meant to say if you have like a townhome or clustered housing or like multiple apartment buildings on a site, that each building has a height limit individual to its building.
And I can see that being interpreted in a problematic way, because if you had a stepped building design, someone could argue that a building segment is each level of the step.
Yeah.
And then you could have not what we're intending.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how I would.
Need a direction.
And
Correct.
And so just so I understand, so the intent is to not allow stepped buildings.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
The intent is if you have a site design with completely separated buildings, not sharing a wall, that each individual building is subject to its own height requirement, versus if you had a building with a stepped foundation, you could have a giant single structure that has 10 different steps, and that is just massive, which we're not intending.
Yeah.
And so for a townhouse, so I think the example that we had been working with were like townhouses, and so those are all one building.
Yeah.
And so would individual townhouses be able to step up a slope, or is I thought that was
No.
how I understood the intention from what you were,
I
what we were
think
talking
if
about.
it's a single, sorry, I'm going to use this
That's okay.
kind of loosely, but if it's like a single slab, whether it's multiple pours, but if it's all technically one slab, one building, one, I don't want to say one occupancy because you could do multiple. Like, if it's all one structure, if you have townhouses, you can obviously split them, townhouse by townhouse, but you could also split them within a townhouse. So you could have the living space 3 feet higher than the garage. And you could say that the living space is a different segment than the garage, to Vice Chair's point. And so I think it's really clear, like me as a developer, if I read that on sloped lots, that average grade is determined per individual building, I'd be like, oh, that's totally clear. But if I read that it was by segment, my juices would be percolating like, I could get so much extra height here.
Vertical, right.
Yeah.
Right, versus like vertical segment.
Exactly.
You're thinking the horizontal.
Exactly. So
I'm sorry, so would it still say determined per individual unit or building?
no, so I'm gonna
Just per
reread.
building?
Yeah, I'm gonna reread what my goal would be. It would say on sloped lots with attached units or multiple building sections, the average grade is determined per individual building to allow design that responds to the grade of the site. Does that feel good to you, Vice Chair? Does that feel
Yeah.
good to the rest of the commission? Sorry, go ahead.
What does multiple building sections mean?
I mean, we could change that to say multiple buildings as well, but I could think that multiple building sections was also what you just defined. But
Which
the
isn't
fact that it's
allowed.
Right.
It's just we want our height
it's still
restriction.
determined per individual building. So that's why I like the.
Okay. Yep.
Is there consensus on that? Head nod, head nod.
I think you should remove the first multiple building sections also.
Okay. I mean, I'm not totally tied to it, but I think it's caught either way. So on slope lots with attached units or multiple buildings.
This is the first time I've seen this, and I think I asked for it specifically, but could somebody clarify how average is calculated?
Oh, we might have, did we go over this when you weren't here?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
So Commissioner Ferguson, the direction we received at the last Planning Commission was to take the average of the highest and lowest finished grade points.
Just one single point. So if the highest grade and the lowest grade are 100 feet apart, you take the middle.
Of the portion of the lot covered by the building.
Got
So
it.
not looking at the overall lot, but yeah, so if you had a 100-foot-long building, that's correct, yeah. And then to
If you
average
had a
it.
huge building where one corner of it was on a piece of the hill that was higher, you could achieve a much more height. The intent was to get more height.
You're taking the average between the two. So if, assume you're at sea level on one.
90% of your square
20
footage is at sea level, 10% of your square
that
footage is
20?
100 feet.
Oh, 100, sure.
You can,
Then your base is at 50.
50.
Yeah.
That's how we're doing average. Okay.
And for a sloped roof, the average, and this is pretty consistent with a lot of cities, but the average is to the center line of the sloped roof.
Right.
I did want to ask on item 1 in this section, based on the exceptions, when we're saying it's a portion of the lot covered by the building to the highest point on the roof. So does that mean just for flat roofs?
It's written as an exception, so number 2, the building height with a slope-tipped gable, et cetera, is half the distance between the highest point of the ridge and the eave. So the exception would be for those pitched roofs and those pitched roof forms.
Totally. So in the non-accepted portion, is it to top of roof only for flat roofs?
Correct.
Got it, okay. I think that's fine. I just want to make sure I understood the intention.
I'll back off if this was thoroughly discussed when I was not here, but it just doesn't seem to anyone else like they created a huge loophole for height allowance, given that this city has a lot of sloped lots.
I think our intent was for sites, the larger sites that are on hills, and there's a couple, that with the height limitation, you can't get the number of units required for the zoning district. So if you have.
Based on the way we used to do height, just from lowest point to highest point.
Right, but which is why we also wanted to make sure that we are maintaining the way that Pacifica measures existing height for like single-family homes, because it does provide more restriction for a shorter house on a hillside.
Yep, you guys thoroughly talked about it. It's all
Yeah.
good.
I think for the bigger buildings that you're worried about, it's probably not, I mean, I'm kind of like deferring to Lauren because I think that on things like townhomes, the buildings are not gonna, like, they'll telescope around the grade in a way that's topographically beneficial.
Sure, but 60 units an acre is not townhome.
Correct. So that was so to your point, for an apartment building, I think it would like nestle in and then, like, I don't,
No, what it would do is have a giant front facade because they're putting maximum units on a fixed piece of property, right?
yeah.
And it's for each individual building. So then it's up to the developer to, if they need to meet 60 units and they have a sloped site, it's probably gonna be their prerogative to have multiple buildings.
I'm thinking of existing apartment buildings in Pacifica. I'm thinking of the one like above Oceana, which is 1 story tall at the back, 4 stories tall at the front. This would allow them to be 6 stories tall at the front, right? I mean, I think we've already allowed for that, but if our allowance was 6 stories, it's now 7.5.
I could see where you see. It's allowing slightly additional height versus how we are measuring height in the
Depending on
existing.
site and, potentially significantly additional height.
But I think like,
I'm gonna leave it. You guys have talked enough.
well, I just think that
after.
the heights that have a lot of slope are currently zoned like R40. And so I don't think you're gonna get right? It's a 40 dwelling unit an acre, so I don't think
Yeah.
you're gonna get a podium, but I see your point.
Completely up
It's not, yeah.
to the builder, right?
I think the R40 range is 30 to 40 dwelling units an acre. Is that right?
That's correct. For R40?
Yeah. Or, I don't know. Doesn't seem
I'm willing to let it
me.
slide and see what they build.
I mean, the other
Okay.
option is to revert back to just how we measure height.
I'm kind of fine with it as is, but I see your point, Alex.
I'm fine with it. It's a hill I might have died on the other time, but let's keep going.
Okay. No pun intended.
Yeah, pun intended. I
Pun
guess, in this
intended.
case. Yeah.
Okay. Does everyone feel okay, or does that need more deliberation? This is a totally new section, and I completely understand if it needs more deliberation.
I think it needs a little more time.
Okay? Do you have thoughts that you want to?
Yeah, I like the original way we measured height. It would seem simpler and was clear. It doesn't allow for as much flexibility for the.
Guess I'm thinking about like
developer.
sites 10 and 12 and some sites
This
that
seems
have.
overly complex.
Hang on, I need to figure out what 10 and 12 are.
Those are the ones along the Caltrans right away on the east side of Highway 1.
10 is 4275.
Got pretty significant elevation difference from the front to the back. It's a few specific sites. I don't know if it ever amounts to anything, but just the way I read it was, if I was trying to get the maximum out of the space, and I was pushing back hard on the additional elevator space and all the other things, because currently the biggest thing in town is 35 feet tall, and you're giving a backdoor to allowing something that I believe is like 80 feet tall. Right, because we're already allowing 55 plus 12 feet of an elevator, and now you're giving them a way to send the average. All they have to do is put one corner of that building on the highest part of the grade possible to achieve a 30-foot elevation discrepancy and give themselves 15 more feet.
you can use 90% of the building on the low, flat part of the lot, and if one piece of it is on a piece of grade that's 30 feet higher, it's just a weird loophole to give to allow a ton more space. You would effectively allow 90% of the floor area to go up 50% because of a corner of the building being on a higher piece of grade.
I guess and for me, I would be fine if we reverted back to the way we measured building height pre this zoning update. But just to kind of help untangle the knot, what were some of the reasons why we were looking at changing the way we define height measurements on sloped sites? One was to ensure that developers can actually develop the right number of units on the land. And then I think another one was it's just more commonly measured, the average of adjacent grade, which, I mean, we don't have to be common.
It would make
I'm
us-
happy to offer an alternative, and I think
Please.
easy thing to calculate. You could just allow our maximum height level above that level of finished grade. So if the
Sorry,
back-
sorry. Say that slowly.
If we have established a maximum height of the building, right? That height of the building applies to all areas of that building. If the area in the back of the building is 30 feet higher than the front, the area of the back of the building can achieve that full height. The area in the front of the building can achieve that full height. Up to the builder to figure out how to do a terraced roof or.
If I'm following you, then I think from standing at the low side of a building and looking at its step up the hill, it could look massive. I personally
But alternatively, you could allow, with the way it's written now, you could allow, instead of stepping up the building, the whole building is that height at
based
the
on
top level.
the average, and I see what you're saying. I think I would prefer if we don't do what we discussed last time about, which is the low elevation is the average of lowest adjacent grade, highest adjacent grade. I'd prefer to just go back to the way we measured height, which is the most restrictive from a development standpoint, but measuring it from the lowest part of the building to the highest part. Because I could see loopholes in what you just suggested if we're allowing any point of that building to be the 50-foot height limit, then looking at
You're thinking of looking at, I'm talking about actual building size.
yeah,
You can't.
it would still
Yeah.
be that would be a really big building too.
Sure.
If anything,
They could
you would
regrade
get
too.
more floor area with that scenario than what we discussed last time.
Well, I disagree. Maybe.
I think if I'm following you correctly. Like at the top, at the height limit's 40 feet, and you said any point of this building could be measured at 40 feet tall. At the top of the site, at the bottom of the site, you'll have 40 feet, and then at the top of
Yeah,
the
it'd
site,
give
you'll
you
have
this-
40
It would give you the
feet.
same total floor area, whether it was flat or sloped.
There would be less floor area if it were based off of the average. I think.
It would just depend on the slope and where you put the building. Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm looking at it's two sites combined. It's like Ocean, or it's, let me just tell you what site numbers it is, but it's behind Pavilion of Flowers.
Is that by Good Shepherd?
Yeah. It cites, oh goodness, I have so many documents open. It cites 2 and H, which is MU 40. And I'm just thinking, like, if you look at that site and you leave the height limit with, like, what it currently is now, then, like, Good Shepherd is non-conform, right? It's already non-conforming. Like, you wouldn't be able to build the 2-story school and church that's there under our housing element, and we have a 40 dwelling unit an acre minimum.
We'd have to regrade, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's also like not always like environmentally preferable, right? Like I think you'd want the buildings to follow the natural topography. Here's the problem. I see the benefits of this for like sites like this. I see the detriment that you're talking about
Depends on
for
who
sites
you're,
that,
depends on who you're seeing the benefits for.
well, I think that we're trying to achieve a density and not have something that looks insane, right? Or not have like 50,000 cubic yards of dirt graded out of a site, right? So the benefit is like for Pacifica. I don't think that either one works.
I would be very preferable to putting it back to the old way of measuring, but that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
So in the case where we put it back to the old way of measuring and is there a possibility, like just bear with me, is there a possibility where we could get an applicant that asks for a variance on height?
I think that'll be the case no matter what.
Okay.
But here's the thing, does that mean that now we've created by having to ask for a variance, does that create like a non-objective standard?
A variance, right, would not have objective standards. Ms. Murray from Van Meter shared that on sloped lots, measuring from the lowest part would limit the amount of units that you can get on a site.
Yeah, obviously.
In terms of limiting the density of the housing element.
Yeah, which means we wouldn't be able to achieve like 40 dwelling units an acre here.
Well, to Alex's point, and kind of what I was saying before, let's say we did revert back to the way we measured height, so based off of the lowest point of the building, and the developer couldn't achieve the number of units they needed within one building, then from a site design perspective, they would just have a second building. And then that height of that second building would be measured independently. Because I think the language we have for the way we measure height in the existing condition is by building, it's not by site, right?
Would have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
I
true?
think
It's by
that's
building and not
correct.
by site in the current?
The current measurement is between the lowest point on the site covered by any portion of a building to the topmost. And so is that per building, or does it establish one height limit for the entire site?
So let's say that there's a 40-foot height limit on the site. Is that 40 feet at the lowest point and 10 feet at the highest point, or is that 40 feet per building?
Or I guess to ask in a different question, if you have two buildings on one slope site, the height of each of those buildings is measured independently, right?
That's correct, independently.
So I think, well, I didn't test fit all of the slope sites with our densities, but, I mean, if a developer wanted to hit the units, and if they needed to build a second building, then they would just have to build a second building. It'd be additional cost to them. It'd be more, if they could hit the unit density with a more lenient height measurement, then that would be more cost effective for them.
Okay.
So nothing would prevent them from building several buildings, correct? On a site, other than
I think
cost
that's
or
correct.
whether they're get adequate profit from building the thing, so.
And there may be other site constraints as well, like the size of the site, things like setbacks, access, fire access, those kinds of things can
sure.
also determine the number of buildings possible on a lot.
I mean, on a lot of these sites, we predetermined how much of the site could be built upon versus open space.
Yeah, I think all of them have a maximum lot coverage.
So that, I'm assuming, would be a massive limitation.
So it seems to me like the old way of measuring height provides some flexibility, and it's not going to be optimal for the developer who wants to build really high density stuff, but it can work.
The way that I see it is the old way that we measured height, or that we're currently measuring height.
Or the current way, probably is
They're-
a better way of saying it.
A developer would have the flexibility to just have multiple buildings if they can't achieve their density with the height restriction for one building.
Or, or mass on the flatter part of the lot, or,
But I think what we had talked about last time, taking the average of the lowest and highest adjacent grade, I think that gives some additional flexibility to developers, but then it increases height.
I'm towing the line because I feel like I've towed the line on 6 different
No, no,
height
no.
limits. And we started at 45, and then we went to 55, and then we went to 60, and now it's like, well, let's call it an average, so like 60, but 60 from the middle.
No, I think, I think we all agree that we don't want what you outlined to happen. Like,
Right.
no one wants a 90-foot
The first building that goes up like that,
Everyone's gonna freak
everyone's
out.
going to think, who are the 7 idiots that allowed this to happen in a town that's never built anything over 35 feet tall?
Agreed.
Exactly.
I feel like I've already been so beat up over height, I am having a hard time participating in this moment, but, you know, I do agree.
Yeah, if I'm giving a pound of flesh on account of the arena, I don't need to also like thank them and give them their first $10.
So I think, hang on. So do we want to just wholesale take this section out, A and
That would be my
B?
preference. I'm open to a more elegant, middle of the road solution that doesn't leave a back door to additional height.
Does Van Meter Williams Pollock want to provide any nuance here or an opinion?
We can see if they're still online.
Karen, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, yes, I'm still here. I am worried that if the original way of measuring is from the lowest point in the site, if your site is sloping up, you know, that you will not, you know, you might be able to get 2 stories or 3 stories, whatever your height limit is at the front, but then you're only going to be getting, you know, very little in the back. So you wouldn't get a full building, multifamily. So it does limit the amount that would go on a site, that you could build on a site. I'm trying to think of the solution to choosing the very highest point on the site. I don't.
It doesn't limit it any more than our existing code limits it. In fact, it loosens it because of the additional height we're allowing.
So I've been trying to figure out why this bothers me so much, and I'm in 9-4.243, and it's like one sentence. It says, height of buildings shall mean the maximum vertical distance measured at the finished grade between the lowest point on the site covered by any portion of a building to the topmost point of the roof. And if we just change that to say, between the lowest point on the site covered by each building to the topmost point on the roof, I think it avoids what you're worried about. But the way it's currently worded, unless I'm reading it incorrectly, it means that if you have, I'm going to take Pavilion of Flowers again. If you're at 0 and you move 3 buildings back, you're still measuring height from 0 from the frontage building.
Right.
You like
That's the problem.
Okay. How do you get the density that we're prescribing in here?
I'm not proposing a build on that site or any other. That's for someone to figure out.
Well, I guess our sites need to be developable, or else, I don't know, we get sued?
I mean, so I will poll after this, but my proposal would be to scrap what you're concerned about and change the current to say each. Covered by any portion of each building to the topmost point of the roof. Which I think avoids your example, but provides the allowance for density.
Yeah, I followed you, but
You still don't
for
like
each
it.
building. Yeah, I'm okay with the terraced buildings, the way it's shown.
Okay, see, I'm okay with the terrace buildings too, but that's not what our code says. Our code says something totally different, which
Right.
prohibits anything. So I think we're saying the same
Yeah, 'cause
thing.
this is a terrace building.
Correct, but look where the height, it doesn't say
Right.
right here. So we're okay with that. No?
We're okay with that, but that isn't what we've described in the packet. If you look at that
Totally.
terrace building, the way we've written it, that bottom building can come up to the top height of the top building.
Totally.
That's what I'm not okay with.
So let me just reiterate what I'm saying.
Yep.
I agree that we should scrap. I didn't even think of your scenario last meeting. So I agree that we should scrap what we've asked staff to put together. I don't think we can leave the current definition. So my alternate proposal, if you're okay to it, well, I think if we're gonna, I know that well, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, I would rewrite 9-4.243 to say height of buildings shall mean the maximum vertical distance measured at the finished grade between the lowest point on the site covered by any portion of each building to the topmost point of that building's roof.
Good.
Okay. So wait, because we're just two people. Did anyone follow or?
Can you say where you're looking at that, what you're reading right now?
Packet pages 101 and 102. 102 is the diagram, 101 is the language.
What I'm looking at, Mark,
Well, I want to know what Sam's looking at, yeah.
I'm in our municipal code in the current definition of height, which is section 9-4.243.
And that
height
is
of buildings.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please,
If I may, but that is repeated on packet page 101, so we didn't make any changes to the definition from the current municipal code. We just pulled that definition down. I think the only difference is we said for all other zones,
Is measured from the
just so everyone has it in front of them.
I kind of like the way that the new height limitation was written, like the verbiage of it, but just reverting it back to the measurement equation that we had in our existing zoning. So something like building height is measured from the lowest finished grade point of that portion of the lot covered by the building to the highest point on the roof.
So you're getting rid of average of highest and lowest.
Yes, and then I'm getting rid of average of highest and lowest. I'm just saying the lowest,
There's a separate instance for sloped lots, right?
yeah. Well, it would be the same for sloped lots, but effectively it's just measured from the lowest finished grade point of that portion of the lot covered by a building to the highest point on the roof of that building.
You don't think we need to say each building?
Or could that be interpreted? No, I guess it could be each building. I think it should be a
me, the
building or each building.
To me, the each settles it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with changing the average, but you're thinking about this in a very good way. I don't want 90-foot buildings. So
Right.
did that fix it for you?
That works for me.
Does that fix it for everyone else? Okay.
And we're removing the average piece.
Correct. So I'm gonna reread it after I annotate it, and make sure that I got this correct. And we're getting rid of the exceptions in this scenario. So the 1 and 2 are going.
I think so.
Okay. I'm seeing nods from
Yeah, please.
3. Okay. So that's consent. I'm seeing nods from everyone. So that's consensus.
Item 2 is kind of a different thing.
Well, item 2 allows more height.
It does but with a sloped roof. If
Yeah.
that's something everyone wants.
It'd be a couple feet.
That's
It's
not
something
I'd wanna fight.
Other cities do, but I
Yeah,
don't.
I'm okay with
Okay.
exception 2. That's not really building massing, right? It's in a
Okay, so we're gonna get rid of exception 1. And, sorry, let me just. I think I got this right. Let me just read it to the group. Okay, building height is measured from the finished grade points of that portion of the lot covered by each building to the highest point on the roof, except as provided below. The building height of a building with a sloped, hip, gabled, mansard, or gambrel roof is measured to a point that is half the distance between the highest point on the ridge and where the eave meets the plate.
I like the second section because otherwise you're gonna have only flat roof buildings.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And then I want to see what Van Meter Williams Pollock thinks, just to make sure that we've closed the loop.
Sure.
Wait, but before we ask, do you not like it?
I prefer stating it as height is measured from the lowest finished grade.
From the, got it.
The lowest.
I crossed out too much stuff. I see. Okay. Building height is measured from the lowest finished grade points of that portion of the lot covered by each building to the highest point on the roof, except as provided below, and then exception 2.
The roof of that building.
The roof, yes.
Of that, of each, or
Yeah.
that.
Of that building is perfect. Okay.
And then I don't know if points should be plural or not.
No, I think it's point.
This one.
Should be point.
Sorry.
The highest point on the roof, because it's the highest.
The lowest finished grade point or points?
Oh, I see.
Singular point.
That one is singular.
Yeah,
Okay. Building
sorry.
height is measured from the lowest finished grade point of that portion of the lot covered by each building to the highest point on the roof of that building, except as provided below.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge improvement.
How does that prevent someone building a bunch of flat roof buildings? Or how does that encourage the
It does
slope?
prevent them from it, and it doesn't
I'm
push them
sorry?
toward, it doesn't prevent them from it or push them towards it.
Okay, so they can continue to build sloped roof buildings?
That's what the second
But-
exception that we're leaving in is there for.
Okay.
To
but
allow
there's-
extra height specifically for decorative roof structure.
All right, so,
I'll give staff a moment. Director Updegrave, is that okay? Do you feel comfortable with the change we just made? And can we ask Karen if she feels like that helps address it?
We can bring Ms. Murphy back.
No?
Ms. Murray.
There we go.
Sorry,
It's Karen
Murphy.
and
Karen Murray. It's
Oh my
Karen Murray.
gosh.
Mr. Lynn, could you bring her back in? Thank you.
I don't know if I have a video, let me see, but you can hear my voice.
Yes,
I
we
think
can.
that if you do say each building, it would allow for individual stepped buildings to move up a slope, right? So the lowest at the street would be the same height from ground to roof as the one behind it, but the one behind it would be, stepped up the grade and be stepping up like that. So I think that's what you're trying to achieve.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
And I think we still want the new diagram of this definition, maybe to like the midpoint of
To the midpoint.
the roof.
Yeah.
It's going to be similar now, but it's going to be the midpoint of the roof.
Yeah, I think this one would stay, the second one in the existing diagram would stay the same, but the one with the pitched roof would change.
And if I could clarify, is this proposed just for the new zoning districts or citywide?
Just for the new zoning district.
I think we're leaving B in there that essentially says for all, so B doesn't change.
No, I mean, well, the average height, as directed before, would only apply in the newly created zoning districts. And so my question is that the same for this change that you're making, this minor modification to the height measurement, or would it apply citywide?
Well, what's the difference between what we just created and item B? The only difference is the exception.
Correct.
So, I mean, to make it clean, I think we just apply this to all zoning districts. But, so that would mean architecturally, single-family homes could get slightly taller.
So let's break this down really quickly. On A, do we have consensus before we get into B? Do we have consensus on what we kind of just read and talked through? Nods, 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 nods. Okay, we have consensus on A. For B, does anybody feel like they want to keep B, or do we want to delete B so that this is a citywide change?
I don't see that as really even the purview for this discussion tonight. That's an existing building code for Pacifica. That has nothing to do with our housing needs.
Does staff have a preference?
They're very similar,
Okay,
but it's the Planning Commission's decision.
okay.
Just, I could be swayed either way, but then I think let's just keep B, because then it's effectively no change for existing zoning districts.
Okay. Commissioner Devine, you have an opinion?
I'm good with fine. I'm fine with keeping B.
You're fine with B? Commissioner Stanhier, B, B, B. Okay. So we're keeping B.
Here.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Yes,
Sorry.
Vice Chair.
Just because we have so little chance to change our zoning, is there a better way to phrase this then? Because then what we're saying is, the only thing that differentiates from the new zoning districts to our existing zoning districts is the exception for sloped roofs.
And that each building,
Well,
I think that's sort of already implied.
yeah, I don't know, I'm just trying to clean it up.
Director Optigrave.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens, particularly when you have very similar language, is while it clarifies for one, it creates ambiguity in the existing. And so now we would have to look at, okay, well, here it says each, it must mean something different. Does it mean something different over here in the next section? So it creates a bit of a consistency problem, potentially.
I can see the consistency problem, but while this rule creates the opportunity for varied housing and encourages dense housing development, this rule would be very different when applied to like McMansion single-family homes coming up in Pacifica. That was why I thought keeping it for B would be appropriate, because a steeply sloped roof on a large single-family home has a very different effect than on a 50-unit per acre development, but I don't really care either way.
And what I was thinking is, would it make sense to make the verbiage we just changed for A1 apply throughout the city, because it's very, very similar. It's the same almost with except for the word each as B, but then the exception, which is little I2, would only be for our new zoning districts.
Yeah, that part I'm 100% can be on board for that.
And then I guess a clarification on that, in our existing zoning, if you have a R1 lot, and if someone wanted to build, or let's say someone wants to build 2 structures on their low-density lot, how is height measured for both of those structures? Is each structure, does each structure have their own height calculation?
In practice, we measure them separately, so, and also depends on the type of use the structure is, but we would look at it independently, typically.
Independently, so then, yeah, so the language we just created is the same as what's being used today. The only change is the exception that we have.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think we should delete B, but I'm not going to die on that hill.
Fine with me.
Just 3,
I think we delete B, yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7. Okay.
You have to change the language of A then to, right?
And then are we saying that the exception only applies to our new zoning districts?
I personally think that traditional roofs that have slopes to them are more aesthetically consistent with what we see in the majority of Pacifica. So I think that what we just did is what I personally would like to see for Pacifica generally. I agree with Director Updegrave that we should pick a single standard.
So then, single-family homes that currently have a 35-foot height limit, the next single-family home that gets constructed, instead of to its top of its roof being 35 feet, it might be 40 feet.
Yes, but one of my next ones is that I think we should delete D in the next section because it seems to contradict the new height measurement. So D, which says parapet walls may project up to 5 feet above the height limit, I think we should just delete that now.
But yeah, I'm thinking of more the impact, so what we're discussing for height limitations citywide, the impact that we could see in our single-family homes, which usually don't have parapets. I mean, they're usually,
They all have parapets in Manor. They're huge. They like have these huge retaining wall,
Okay.
there are like at least 3 in my neighborhood that are currently under construction.
I guess in Lindemar, it's a lot of craftsman homes. So they like all have pitched roofs. So the next home that would go up would have
That's
a
why I
taller-
thought they should be separated, because you're accidentally creating they're two different conditions, right?
What if we clarify that this is citywide, except the exception does not apply to single families? Staff, am I like unintentionally creating another issue?
It's at the discretion of the planning commission.
Commissioner Wall?
Could you repeat that again?
So I think what I'm saying is we get rid of B. The height limitation that we just created applies citywide, except we carve out single families.
For the exception.
For the exception. Correct. So in item 2, I would change this to say then the building height of a building, comma, excluding single-family homes, comma. Okay.
That gives the added benefit of including the sites that we have, like the large infill development sites we haven't included here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry to belabor that, but I know 5 years from now, we're gonna have a project and go back to the language and say, why is it so convoluted?
Yeah. So okay, let me building height in the higher density districts, R30, et cetera, through MUI 60, is measured as followed. Building height is,
No, it shouldn't say.
it shouldn't say that at all. I have to say, yeah.
Just say building height is measured as followed.
Yep. Okay. There you go. Building height is measured as follows. Building height is measured from the lowest finished grade point of that portion of the lot covered by each building to the highest point on the roof of that building, except as provided below. The building height of a building, excluding single-family homes, with a sloped, hipped, gabled, mansard, or gambrel roof is measured to a point that is half the distance between the highest point on the ridge and where the eave meets the plate, period. That is the end of the section.
Should single-family home be just R1? Or should it say single-family home?
I think it should say single-family homes, which are no longer allowed uses in any of the multifamily.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last comment.
Vice Chair was asking if this should be extrapolated to the R1 district or to single-family homes in totality, and I think it should be single-family homes in totality.
Because you can build them outside of an R1 district, or
Because I think we don't want 40-foot single-family homes anywhere in Pacifica. Unless, yeah.
Because you could have a single-family home in an R2?
that's what I'm guessing.
Yes, maybe.
I believe so, with a conditional use permit.
Okay.
Or on the, like, the old ranch, like, that are
Yeah.
low-density residential.
I think generally we don't want
Or
40
like
feet single-family
agricultural where you
homes.
could have a home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
And just one additional clarification.
Please.
Is that the defined terms in our zoning code are single-family dwelling rather than home, so we would use dwelling just to be consistent with the definitions.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we'll add a diagram of the definition. And then moving on to 102, I would propose we delete D because I think with what we just did, there is no reason for parapet walls to project 5 feet above the height limit.
Concur.
Okay? Concurrence, concurrence, concurrence. Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to remind Planning Commission that that was a constraint on density that Van Meter Pollock, Williams and Pollock had identified, that measuring to the top of a parapet will limit, could potentially limit the density for buildings and reduce the ability to provide open space.
Sorry, isn't it covered under the exception from A in the page above, though?
No, because that's sloped. I don't know what hipped.
What's a gabled mansard?
So gabled mansard is when you have the gable, like where a normal gable would go like this. You cut the tip up and you have a little parapet in there and you hide all your mechanical equipment, solar, et cetera, in the well. You have a roof well.
So just say gabled mansard or parapet? Gabled mansard, parapet, parapeted or gambrel roof?
Gambrel roof.
I don't see any difference to my mind. Is like the gabled mansard and the parapet, they're both just screening for whatever's there.
I believe the difference is that one is a roof form, so actually structurally part of the building, whereas a parapet is a projection from a roof and not necessarily part of the roof form itself.
That's right. Okay. I mean, I'm fine leaving it. I feel like we just fixed the height for everything in 5 feet.
If we leave it, what are the worst case if we leave it?
People will put parapets.
Yeah, go ahead.
On note C, packet page 102, I could be wrong. I pushed for this change, but I think in the summary of changes, this is spelled out differently. I don't think it was 4 feet above. I thought it was, oh, I'm sorry. E covers it.
Yeah. That was taken from 18 to 12.
And to clarify, the allowances in C, I believe, are allowed in the current code, but the way that it's written, they're all mushed together and very unclear. And so with these additional exceptions, we've pulled them apart so that they're in like categories with each other and easier to use.
Is 5 feet a standard? Does anybody know parapet wall?
Yeah. I think 42 inches.
That'd be a railing height, right?
Right. Well, so you start needing weird OSHA things if you're less than 42 inches. So when you rough in, it's usually at least 48. You could say 4 feet. I mean, 5 feet might do a better job.
I'm not going to quibble over a foot.
It might do a better job covering mechanical equipment that we don't want to see. Like, I'd rather see a parapet be a foot higher than a HVAC unit. Okay, I'll just retract. I'm fine leaving it in.
Are we recessing at 10?
Sure. We might be done by 10. You
Okay.
never know.
Sure.
Okay. Go quickly after this. Anything else on height before we move to the fences, hedges, walls, and plantings? Okay.
No.
No, and
Okay.
apologies, I just,
No, it was
I think that was
hugely great
great.
fixing.
I
That's
think that was
exactly what
really
this is
good.
for. Okay. So I have lots of stuff on the retaining wall stuff. I'm super, super excited that we're not gonna have 30-foot retaining walls.
this was a long time coming.
Yeah, really. You missed it last meeting. So I have some minor changes that I'd like to propose. So I'd like to have it say when there is a difference in the ground level on the opposite sides of a retaining wall or retaining fence. So instead of crossing out fence, and then continue on with everything that's said in there, height shall be measured, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think we need to define the terracing we want to see. So I would like to add at the end of this section shall not be construed to limit terracing of retaining walls or retaining fences. Terraced walls shall be offset at least 3 feet from each other by a planting area. And that way, we have stuff that's consistent with a lot of other cities and plants. Does anyone like that, dislike that?
I like it for screening and
Yeah.
breaking up.
Lauren?
Can I ask for clarification on, so bringing back your first comment? So bringing back or fence,
Or retaining fence,
retain.
not fence.
What's
Yeah.
a retaining fence?
So like a fence with a kicker, where it's retaining a portion of
Like
it.
it has a footing?
Yeah, exactly. A fence on a footing.
What about the scenario where you have a retaining wall and then a fence on top of it?
Yeah.
Then are we gonna measure both the wall and fence? That is the wall height? Because what I was interpreting, what was presented in the language before us, I was interpreting the flexibility for a fence to be on top of a wall and not add to the wall height. In case, like, let's say you need, for terracing, let's say you needed it for OSHA.
Yeah. Or so that someone is like not falling off of a retaining wall.
Yeah.
I thought it was covered in A, that it could be 6 feet in height, but I think what you're saying is you would like to clarify that this doesn't delimit fences from being on top of walls. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I guess I was just trying to understand the reality of the change. So what, in a hypothetical scenario, if we added back in or retaining fence or fence, and if someone needed to build a retaining wall and then they also needed to put a fence on top of it, they need to put a 3-foot fence on top of it. Does that mean that they could only have a 3-foot wall because in total it's 6 feet?
If I could clarify just sort of the mechanics of the revision. So the Planning Commission had directed us to revise the measurement for the height of retaining walls only. And so this second sentence about when there's a difference on opposite sides of a fence, it's measured from the higher ground level. That's just taking what it was previously and separating it from the retaining wall. And does that make sense?
So then
So if we were to restore or fence, then both would just be measured from the lower.
Oh, so.
Versus, yeah.
Okay, so the added sentence helps distinguish the fence as a separate entity from the wall.
Right, because what we didn't want to do was then not have any, like, that's just how fences are currently regulated.
Yeah.
And so to capture that, we had to add an additional sentence.
So that additional sentence goes hand in hand with removing or fence.
Right.
I'm okay with removing or fence. I just want so that clarification I think is good. I'm totally okay with removing or fence and leaving it as it is. I really want to make sure that the terracing is clear. Does the terracing work for everybody? Yes?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. All right, on to parking and loading. Does anyone have comments on parking and loading 103 or 104? Okay.
Can I
Yeah, please.
add one more fact?
Yeah.
Some of us need deer fences, and deer can jump about 8 feet high.
Okay.
So these fences are not effective.
Well, I
At
guess,
stopping deer to get into your yard. And
we're not changing the fence height limitation. Like, if I wanted a fence on my side yard, it could still be 6 feet tall.
or on a back, like if you're facing some undeveloped property, it could be 8 feet. I like a deer fence.
Oh, if it's just a fence without a wall, I think that the height on the front and the back is exactly the same, right? It's just a
Right.
fence,
So,
not a fence.
so are we proposing no fence, hedge, wall, or screen planting of any kind shall be constructed or grown to exceed 8 feet in height unless otherwise required by law? Is that what the request is?
Just trying to understand what we're doing here. That was,
There were no changes proposed to the fence height itself. So that section here, A, is just shown for reference to contextualize the change in B.
What's the current maximum fence height, Pacifica?
It's 6 feet unless otherwise required by law within any required side yard. There's a bunch of iterations within any required
Good enough.
side yard to the rear of the required front yard of any dwelling, et cetera.
Sorry, I asked.
No, it's okay. It's a long sentence.
So Commissioner Godwin, are you proposing to change it to 8 feet?
I would like to do that. I know people in my area have built deer fences
I think it's
higher than 6 feet.
I'd love to have a deer.
I think it might be a fire code requirement because firefighters can't hop an 8-foot fence. I don't know, someone would have to check me on that. It's not usually my purview. But if you were gonna go above 6 feet, it usually has to be the trellis so you can get your fingers in and hop.
Oh, yeah, the lattice is 6 feet and then the 2-foot lattice.
Yeah,
Lattice.
Yeah, I mean.
I believe I
that's
read
fine.
that, sorry, butting in, that it needs to be a see-through, if you will,
Yeah.
above that. So, and that's for safety reasons
Yeah.
on
yeah.
top. It's a, trellis or whatever.
So shall we add, except that a 2-foot lattice shall be allowed on top of a 6-foot fence?
I'd want it to be vetted with building and fire code, which I don't have.
How about we stick to the housing needs agenda that we have in front of us? And
We're drooling because it's our one opportunity to change.
it's a wholesale change.
So we've been
to the zoning
asking
of
for
the
this
city.
for 10 years.
And I believe I've shared this before, but the housing element does also require us to take a comprehensive look at our zoning ordinance. And so that is forthcoming work. Separately from the housing element rezoning.
So there's more of this.
There's more to come.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna keep moving then, unless there's massive outcry. Okay, 104H, do we want to require folks to provide an off-street parking space for frontages? That seems inconsistent with everything we've talked about in the past. But I also like on-street parking, so.
What?
H, residential driveways for lots with 40 feet of lot frontage or more shall be designed to provide at least one on-street parking space. For lots with less than 40 feet of lot frontage, driveways should be, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but.
So that's existing, within the existing ordinance.
Let's not touch it then. As long as it's not prohibitive, let's not touch it. Okay. Packet page 105. Packet page 106. Oh, you know what? It was removed on the second one, but at the top, it says at least one of the required off-street parking spaces per unit shall be in a garage or carport, and that was intended to be removed. And the staff report described it as removed, and it was removed in the second one.
I'm sorry, what packet page and number?
It's packet page 106, and it's two-family and multiple family, including studio townhouses and condominiums. And then it says at least one of the required off-street parking spaces per unit shall be in garage or carport, but a couple meetings ago, we all discussed that unbundled was fine. And it got removed from 3, but not from 2. Do you see it?
Yes, the top of page, so 2 for the two-family and multiple family.
Yeah.
In R30, et cetera, to remove the last clause that says at least one of the parking spaces. Okay.
Yes. Okay. 106, 107, 108, 109, 110. I mean, I'm gonna, 111, 112 is EV charging. I saw the changes we discussed were made. I'm just gonna keep, does anyone have a revision on any of these pages?
I was going to say, can we maybe not go page by page?
Yeah.
And instead do high level, like who has a revision for
Well, yeah, going forward,
the
who
nearest
has a
page?
Yeah.
Would we be able to recess before we get into Article 54?
Yep, let's recess now. It's 10 o'clock. We will reconvene at 10:05 and start with Article 54.
Thanks.
To reconvene, starting with Article 54. Vice Chair, did you have comments on 54?
We're on package page.
Packet page
114.
115.
115.
Just the indentations on 10, 11, 12 seemed unnecessary, but I'm sure that would eventually get caught.
Look, I have it.
I think it tabbed over because of the extra the one extra decibel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, on A, on the next page, I'd like to add, if we're gonna have residential use with minimum of 50%, I wanna make sure that we're noting the minimum commercial FAR in here.
This section applies to the new R districts, new M districts, and the new MUI districts, and they don't all have a commercial requirement.
Okay, then I'm gonna retract that.
But when you look further on within the MU districts, we did add that within the use provisions.
Perfect. On B in here, is that minimum supposed to say maximum? Railings or parapets that do not exceed the maximum height required by building code may be located in the step back area?
I think it is supposed to say the minimum because the building code establishes the minimum height for life safety.
Got it. So the OSHA things we were just talking about, okay. Anything, Lauren? I have a lot of stuff on the buy rate. Does anyone else have buy rate stuff?
Go for it.
Okay.
Highlighted the whole thing. Because I knew it needed careful consideration.
So I think this is really a big improvement from the last iteration. I crossed out a lot of stuff and left in a lot of stuff. So I think for purpose, I don't think we should put in number 2. I think the purpose of the law is to implement State Government Code Section 65583, et cetera. And then under B, I removed the sentence that said specifically it applies to the sites listed in the City of Pacifica 6th cycle. And then in C, I changed it to say by right or ministerial approval without discretionary action is required for sites identified in subsection 9-4503 that meet all of the requirements of Government Code 65582.2. So those are kind of the big ones in A, B, and C.
What was the change in C, Chair Hauser?
I just clarify, so I'm clarifying it because I'm about to take out one other thing. So by right or ministerial approval is required for site, I left the parentheses, is required for sites identified in the subsection that meet all of the requirements of Government Code Section 65582.2. And then, after I spent the weekend reading AB 130, I took out 1 through 5. Because it should be consistent with the government code, and trying to define that right now is not a good plan. So those are my changes, and with those, I'm totally good with that. Commissioner Davis, since you highlighted it in yellow, does that work for you?
So you're talking about C, leaving it in, but then taking out 1 through 5? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, so for A, I deleted 2. For B, I deleted the last sentence. And for C, I deleted 1 through 5, essentially.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay.
And your intent was because it needs to be consistent with government code regardless, so why reiterate government code here?
Exactly, especially since government
Yeah.
code changes often, especially last week.
You're just saying it's redundant, right? 'Cause
I'm saying it's going to create confusion when the government code changes, and I
Yes.
think we're providing extra and unnecessary direction to people if it's already in the state law, which is what this
yeah, the state law applies here,
Correct.
just like the rest of the state. Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
I will, if I may, Chair Hauser, share that in our discussions and preliminary feedback with HCD, these are the specific things that they check for having in the ordinance.
Yeah.
And so removing them may create problems for HCD because they specifically check for these provisions.
I think my preference would be to make this change because it's already in the housing element. It's already written very specifically in the housing element, and my preference would be to make this change, and if HCD pushes back to leave it up to council if they want to re-include it. That's my preference. Does anyone have other
And
preferences?
we may or may not have informal feedback from HCD before it goes to city council.
But then in the resolution, we took away the ability for a minor HCD change.
And what
So
the
then-
planning
That's
commission
correct.
is recommending, but the city council can do whatever they want. So we're leaving it in their purview.
So if we made a recommendation tonight for city council and then early August, city council adopted, and then after, let's say in September, HCD says, oh no, we need this language back in here, does this need to come back to council?
If HCD said that we needed to revise the ordinance, it would need to come back to planning commission.
Planning commission.
So it would need to go through the whole process over again.
I mean, the housing element didn't come back to us in March because council directed that it didn't. Couldn't they do the same thing with this?
So with I'm just trying to, because we would be doing a brand-new ordinance that would require, additional changes. So, so if it's just these changes and Planning Commission acknowledges that council could make those changes and it would just be limited to those, then I would think there'd be an argument we could just make those changes. But the one thing I would note is that subsection 5 does cross-reference certain sections and standards in the municipal code that are, and while state law does generally refer to objective standards, this is more precise. So I would recommend
Leaving 5.
at least keeping in subsection 5.
Okay, I would be amenable to keeping subsection 5. Does the rest of the commission agree?
I guess I'd hate for further delay if we had to come through.
I think what we're doing is we're leaving, to the city attorney's point, I think what we're doing is leaving for this if
Saying if
council, well, it's not HCD. If council directs that they want to put this back in here because staff is recommending it, then it doesn't have to come back to the planning commission. But our recommendation is clear.
What if council agrees with commission and wants to keep this removed, and then HCD says, we're not going to certify you unless it comes back? Then we have to go back through the process again?
Then I think we do a small text amendment.
We could do a text amendment, but it would have to come back.
And then that would further delay certification. I guess in our motion, if we make a motion of approval tonight, can we include in our motion if this text does need to come back, it can without coming through Planning Commission again?
I think a new ordinance has to is legally required to come to the planning commission.
Okay. And Chair, so is your comment in an effort just to stay consistent with government code?
Yes, I also don't want to take a yellow highlighter and give people a map on how to do by right development in Pacifica.
Mm-hmm. The right team. I mean, I'm fine with it. It's just, it's a bummer that it could potentially come at a cost of delaying certification like 2 months at least.
But it could not.
Yeah, it could be a non-issue.
So if I could clarify what I'm understanding, and it's where I'm coming from and agreeing with Chair, is that state law states this all anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We just saw a state law come out that changed a lot of things around this type of thing. is it really incumbent upon us to reiterate what the state law says in our zoning when it could very well change? And if it's not defined, then it just reverts to state law and the changes that come.
I think we all agree. I was just trying to make sure we're understanding the bureaucracy that, you know, it just made
My
delay.
hunch is that we have a resolution that says that this rezoning is internally consistent with the housing element, and the housing element says all of this stuff already. So
And
why
that-
put it in the rezoning?
HCD won't be a stickler.
We're already saying you have to be consistent with state law.
Okay.
So the feedback that we did get from HCD, these are the criteria that they look for within the zoning ordinance. So we did receive specific feedback that we met their criteria.
And this criteria being literally stating these requirements word for word.
That is
Or-
correct.
Or would just referencing the code, the government code, satisfy their requirement?
Like, for one example, it says topic, by right developments include 20% affordability.
Oh, that's one of the HCD review topics?
Sites allow 16 units per site, require a minimum density of 16 or 20 units per acre, and so on.
Can that be interpreted as a given if we just reference the government code?
My opinion is no.
Okay. I mean, I agree with Chair Hauser. I think it's beneficial for us to not restate all these requirements, but I think it's going to cause headache for staff, and it's going to delay certification of our housing element, and then it's going to come back to us anyways.
I mean, I've got an opinion, and this is my opinion, and so I think we can get consensus, but I would like to make the changes.
I'll back you on it.
I will back you on it as well, and I think, in my experience, I try and avoid making decisions on assumptions and/or what I think might happen,
Yeah.
and make the decision that I think is right for the community, and let's just see where it goes from there.
Okay, about 3,
Go for it.
4, 5. Okay, okay. Okay, so those changes, but I'll leave 5 in
But
for
leave-
the direction of City Attorney Murphy.
Yes, great. So we will leave, and in terms of leaving 5 in, we could say in the first sentence, by right or ministerial approval is required for sites identified in subsection 9-4.5403B that meet the requirements of the government code and that conform with the objective development standards identified in the specific section.
Yeah.
And then the remainder of that sentence.
Okay.
Okay, and then leave in the language about pursuant to government code 65582.2I, as may be amended from time to time, any subdivision is subject to all laws, including the city's ordinance and the remainder of that, correct?
Yes, I think that's a good, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Saved.
And could you also clarify, please, the changes to subsection B?
In B, I'm removing the sentence specifically, it applies to the sites listed in the Pacifica 6 cycle, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the last sentence is coming out.
So the whole lot.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And A2, correct?
And, yes, exactly. Okay. So, all right, I don't have anything on 118.
So just one other thing that I would like to note is that we're also concerned that HCD would be concerned with the removal of any references to the sites inventory or the designation of the shortfall. And we realize you may still want to take that out, but just wanted you to know
preserve
that
the
we're
comment.
concerned about HCD.
Okay.
And, certainly we would make, if these stay out, whatever arguments we could, but we are concerned about that.
I think you're hearing consensus from the commissioners unless anyone else wants to jump in. And I think that you're also hearing that if council wants to override us, that we're supportive of them overriding us and not coming back to us.
I guess we'll liaise, but when when staff gives a presentation to council in August likely, I would feel a little better if council's aware of this discussion we had, that we all agree that we want these sections removed, but we want council to have full information of some of these items were specifically requested by HCD, and the commission submits to whatever council would like to do.
And if we are able to, as we're going to try to do, coordinate with HCD before we go to council and discuss these issues and what they need in the ordinance, and if HCD indicates, yes, you need these to achieve certification, would the... what would you like
Could you
us to
just
say?
tell council that that's the feedback you receive from HCD?
Okay, yes.
I don't know, that's my thought.
I think we're asking that, the staff report just provide any relevant information.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we understand.
I don't think legally
Understand.
what we're saying holds a lot of water, but we're trying to make it work and be flexible, but I think we all want to, I think we all know that the overlay was surprising to all of us after, again, the years that went into this, so we're trying to make it work for everyone.
Understood. Okay.
So at our, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you for your patience with the questions. I just want to make sure we understand it correctly.
Yeah, no, it's important. Thank you for giving us the full.
You answer more of our questions than we
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Commissioner Davis.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I think I interrupted you and you're apologizing. So at our May 19th meeting, it was mentioned that this, I believe the whole package had been sent to HCD. Have we heard back from them specifically on this?
Yes, we have.
Okay. And so we're hearing that from you now. Is this part of that feedback we got from HCD? I'm wondering why it wasn't maybe included. I was under the understanding that as we were going through this hearing process and continuations, that if we heard back from HCD, that information would be shared with us? Maybe I misunderstood.
Right. No, we are sharing it. It wasn't included in the staff report specifically for this because it was not the direction that we had received to remove it. Like we had not received direction to remove this portion of the ordinance that HCD reviewed.
Oh, no, that wasn't my question. I'm sorry. Maybe I asked it in a confusing manner. I was under the impression in general, if you got feedback from HCD on this package, that we would have, that information and feedback would have been included like in your staff report to us. But the other question I had, does HCD have the statutory authority to require us to put this in? Do you know the answer to that?
HCD does have the statutory authority to confirm whether or not we've complied with the rezoning requirements, and we need them to confirm that we've complied with those requirements in order for them to issue a letter of substantial compliance and for us to have what's typically referred to as a certified housing element. So that's the ultimate goal, is to achieve a certified housing element, and this is a step in the process. So I hope that answered your question, and if not...
Not really, but we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. I would ask that anyone else that has comments between now and packet page 144 let us know.
Does anybody have an additional printed packet as my computer died early?
You could look at mine. You have to give my
That's-
comments,
that's
though.
all right. Okay.
I have a comment.
Okay, what page?
125. So, okay. So, okay, MU 30 and under the permitted and conditional uses, item 17, emergency shelters for 20 or less persons or beds subject to the standards of Article 53. And then that same statement shows up again as item 20, which seems repetitive, but then also, I believe this is the only zoning district where that use shows up, which seems odd to me because it's MU 30. I don't know if that was intentional or not, or if we could have some background.
Are you on page 125?
124, 125.
124, 125, yeah.
And you said the first reference was what number?
17.
It shows us both a permitted use and a conditional use. So it's
Oh,
a permitted
the-
on 17 and a conditional on 20.
The permitted use is for 20 or less persons or beds, and the conditional use is for more than 20, up to 30.
Got it. Okay, I see
It's
the
like the
differences.
the occupancy.
Between those. So then second half of my question, this is the only, I believe, this is the only zoning district where this use shows up. And I don't necessarily take issue to the use. I just found it odd that it only shows up in MU 30.
That is odd. It's inconsistent. It's not, in MU 40, it's not included.
Mm-hmm.
In MU 50, not included. Yeah.
If you could give us a few minutes,
Yeah.
we'll look at Article 53.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll come back to this. And then again, anybody else have comments between now and 144?
Okay, should it be?
Nothing before 144.
Okay, so on 144, we're back in the multifamily housing combining district. So I'm just adding the PY that we agreed on earlier throughout this, section. Anybody have anything else on the rezoning before we get into the land use map? Okay, so we'll come back to 125. The last things I have here are the land use map.
I have additional information on the emergency shelters. So the reason why they were included in MU 30 is because I believe they were allowed in the existing zoning, and so not wanting to make that change.
Got it.
In the allowable uses, is what our consultant shared.
Yeah, currently, they're permitted or conditional in the community commercial, the C2 zoning district pursuant to Article 53.
Which I think is what?
Yeah, so it's being rezoned, since it's being rezoned to MU30, we still need to provide emergency shelters. Emergency shelters aren't required in every district, and there was a study that was done when it was originally adopted, determining an appropriate place to allow them. So it's trying to be consistent with what was done back at that time.
Should it then be a permitted use in MU 40 and 50?
I think that would require additional analysis. I believe it's not currently a permitted use in the existing zoning.
Got it. Okay, I follow you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So moving then to 147, which is the general plan land use map.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more
Absolutely.
clarification? Because we were involved in that, I missed what your change on packet page 50 in the combining district.
Just to add the PY that we added in the general plan. So it's more consistency internally.
Thank you.
Yeah, but only the actual dash PY.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have something on 145.
Yes.
On table 9-4, we're going to take out site 23. Correct?
All the 23s are out,
Okay.
but I will cross this one out for you.
I forgot you were doing it.
Okay, 147. Any comments on the land use map?
If just the same detailed review that we requested in the zoning map, if that could also be done to the land use map.
Thank you, Vice Chair Berman. That work is underway.
Thank you.
And that, I believe, takes us to the resolution 2H, which is 48. I had one comment on this. In the third whereas, I'd like it to say, whereas the city of Pacifica prepared a rezoning program to implement the housing element. And that's my only comment on the reso.
Chair Hauser, just to clarify, so you would replace program HEI1?
Yeah, because this is implementing the whole housing element, right? The CEQA document covers the rezonings for the whole housing element.
It recovers the rezoning, which is specified in HEI1. But there are many different programs and actions within the housing element itself that are not included in the rezoning and not included in the EIR, which is, I think, why the specific references have been included throughout.
Then I'll rescind my comment on this one. Any other comments on the overriding considerations? I don't have any comments following this personally, so I don't know if folks have anything on the Diet and Bhatia report. I mean, at this point, I feel like trying to amend the EIR is not helpful. And then everything else is public comment, which we've listened to, read, and heard. Okay? All right. So I'm kind of going to just poll everyone really quickly so that we can understand what the motion is. So starting with you, Commissioner Davis, are there any other things you'd like to talk about, or are you willing to support a motion with the changes we've implemented? Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Commissioner Redfield? Thumbs up. Commissioner Godwin?
I'm good.
Vice Chair?
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner
Good.
Ferguson? Commissioner Devine? All right. Does staff have any clarifications you would like us to make or that you need?
I believe we have all of the notes from the discussion for the changes, and you will also be reviewing the final resolution. So I feel confident that staff has everything and that you will do a triple check of our work.
Okay.
I think that within the motion, you would want to state as amended by the Planning Commission, I would maybe specifically call out removal of Site 23, and note that council can add the by right provisions back in without coming back to PC.
Oh, so we
In
do
the
wanna
motion.
state
Yeah, I think
that?
if you put it in the motion, then that provides us a better avenue to relay the information.
How did you state it? Sorry, Director Updegrave?
The motion should include, that, I don't remember how I said it. Council can add the by right back without PC approval.
For subparagraph C.
Yes.
Or whatever let me just make sure. I want to be really clear on which
In the case of
subparagraph.
specific HCD.
Correct. But I don't want to make sure, I don't want that to be everything related to by right. I would
Right.
like that related to 1 through 4. So let me just get back to it.
And
Right, that's not included in the motion. So, so 9-4.503, Vice Chair, you seem like you're teeing up the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 9-4.503, subsection C, sections 1 through 4.
Okay.
And I just wanted to also add that there was a concern noted about whether HCD would express concern about the removal of the second sentence in subsection B.
Could we just leave it to the whole section?
I really don't want to.
Okay.
117.
Yeah, they could. Sorry.
Commissioner Davis, did you have a comment?
I'm trying to think how we could qualify it. Something along the lines of, we removed it, but I'd like to include something about if required by HCD, council can put it back in without coming back to us. If formally or officially required, not advised, but required by HCD. Something like, is that too much?
We cannot guarantee,
Okay.
we cannot
All right,
guarantee.
no, she said it was too much. I'll drop it. Yeah, I'll give it.
And just as I'm sure you all know, that this is a recommendation to the council, so the council can make this and other changes as well. So it's just incorporating in your motion, your thoughts on if HCD is requiring it.
So we have the.
If you desire.
Thank you. So we have the removal of Site 23. We have the comments as amended by Planning Commission throughout the meeting. Yeah.
City Attorney Murphy, what if we made an overarching comment that said the Planning Commission recognizes that council may make further changes that don't come back to the Planning Commission, just generally, instead of specifically to that section? I mean, it's their purview anyway. We report to them. They're like our bosses.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know that that's necessary. You could certainly incorporate that in there. I think what Director Updegrave, but I don't want to speak for you, was trying to get at is the by right approval and whether the commission would be, if HCD requires it, whether, I mean, I guess you would just want us to acknowledge that when it goes to the council. And
That's what I was saying, if it could just be mentioned in the staff report, so if you were to provide a presentation, if there's a slide that goes over commission's recommendation for the by right section changes, but the commission acknowledges that HCD may require this language to be in our zoning, in which case we defer to city council on whether they would like to incorporate it back in, and we as a commission do not feel a need to review again.
I mean, I think my point is that HCD is reviewing the whole rezoning, so I don't know why we would limit it to the by right. If HCD has comments and council wants to override us, right? What I'm trying to avoid doing is, right? Like,
Right. May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Because what I heard from Vice Chair Berman is wanting to make sure that this discussion that's happened here is also shared with City Council in the staff report. So perhaps instead of focusing on the very detailed and who overrides who, the motion could include direction to staff to include the discussion on by right in the staff report and presentation to City Council.
I think what I would prefer is that in the staff report that the Planning Commission discussed that if HCD had further changes, that despite the fact that our motion doesn't support it, that we as a Planning Commission felt it unnecessary for this to come back to us.
But then that contradicts the change that we made in the resolution.
Yeah, but here's where I'm coming from on this. I feel like as we pick through the buy rate, this is all becoming about this buy rate thing, which I don't want it to become. Like that's like the point, right? We're not trying to yellow highlight this. And we have a housing element that we all spent meeting going through, that we all approved together and recommended in January in 2024. And then in March of this year, it went back to council without us. It like skipped us. And if that can skip us, why does this need to be specifically deliberated on? Council clearly has the power to make these decisions without us. So
And they've enacted that power, is your point. So why do we even, okay, yeah. And even if we said, oh, you know, we want to hold firm on these changes, I would still back it. I'm just acknowledging that if HCD absolutely requires this language, we're just adding like 3-4 months to our certification.
yeah, I mean, I think what we could do is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
No.
we're not canceling meetings in summer, right? Like we're still meeting. We don't have any, can't remember what it's called when you have time off for summer.
Summer break or like, yeah.
Recess?
Yeah, thank you.
Recess.
Yeah.
We don't have any recesses, so it's not like we're going anywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, if council already knows and they've already enacted skipping us, then they know they can't.
saying.
Yeah, so I do want to clarify that if it requires changes to the zoning ordinance after it's adopted, a new ordinance, I believe, does need to come back to the Planning Commission. I think that's required by law, and I don't think there's any way to bypass that.
So here's what I don't understand. Council can't redline what, like, we just spent 2 or 3 meetings redlining this. Can't council redline things?
They can, yes. So that's why the motion, I thought, was meant to just inclusion of the discussion in the staff report.
Yeah, I think you can include it in the staff report without the motion including it. So for the record, we can include it in the staff report. Council does not need our blessing to redline things. They get to do whatever they want.
And I you know, kind of zooming out, it's probably going to be in staff's best interest to make sure council's aware of the extraneous effort that might be required to try to convince HCD otherwise. So I feel like even if we didn't have this discussion, you'd probably advocate for whatever's most streamlined to begin with.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, I don't think it, is that okay?
Does not need to be included in the
It
motion.
does not, yeah. Okay, I'm ready. So we have remove site 23, and then changes as amended by planning commission throughout this meeting. Okay. I move to adopt the following attached resolutions. Resolution recommending that the City Council certify Pacifica Housing Element sixth cycle targeted general plan amendments, rezoning, and objective development standards program, final environmental impact report, State Clearinghouse number 2024-050168, in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and adopt findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations in accordance with CEQA and the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, MMRP, in accordance with CEQA. And resolution recommending that the City Council approve the rezoning program, including amendments to general plan text and the land use map to reflect the new general plan land use designations and to ensure consistency with the housing element, with amendments to chapters 1, introduction, 3, community design, 4, land use, and 7, conservation, and amendments to the zoning code, chapter 4 of title 9 of the City of Pacifica Municipal Code, and the zoning map to reflect the new zoning districts and to ensure consistency with the housing element, including amendments to Article 2, 3, 5, 6, 6.5, 23, 24, 25, 28, and addition of Articles 54 to 67. And remove Site 23 from the housing element and amend these amend these documents as Planning Commission requested throughout this meeting, and incorporate all maps and testimony into the record by reference as amended.
One clarification.
Yeah.
The removal of Site 23 was from the rezoning program, not
From
the housing element.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
From the rezoning program, because it still shows up in the housing element document.
Yes, thank you.
Does that motion work? Okay. Is there
Second.
a second? Okay, let's all please vote.
Motion by Vice Chair Berman, seconded by Commissioner Ferguson. That vote passes unanimously.
Yay. All right, thank you guys. That was a lot of work from staff, and I really, really appreciate it. And I know that sometimes we and I can be a lot, so thank you for dealing with all of our changes. Okay, so I believe that brings us to oral communications, which we moved. Do we have folks on Zoom or on the phone? All right. So I don't have any speaker cards. I will open public comment for oral communications. And I will close public comment for oral communications. Yeah? Okay.
Can you state that for the record?
And
There's no callers online?
Chair, there were no comments or no raised hands.
Okay. With that, I will officially close oral communications. Does commission have communications?
I'm going to be out of town on the 21st. I'm not sure if there's a meeting that night, but it's 2 weeks from now, so I think there might be.
All right. Do we have a hearing plan for the 21st?
We do not currently have anything scheduled, and I can confirm by the end of the week with the commission.
If staff needs to call and poll the planning commission, just to all commissioners, please let's be respectful and make sure that we're providing them with information respectfully. Okay. Any other staff communications? Commission communication, or I'm sorry, no more commission communications, staff communications.
We have no staff communications this evening.
Okay, can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I'll second that, let's vote.
Motion by Commissioner Ferguson, seconded by Chair Hauser. That motion passes unanimously.
Fabulous, thank you.
You said by 11. Didn't you?
Oh, 11.
I am actually very